The first Tuesday of the month of April is upon us. Wise guys are back. Dave McCann, Blaine Fowler. We've got a loaded show tonight. We'd say happy spring, but there's like 6 inches of snow out in the yard.
I wore my spring shirt.
Yeah.
Just because in my mind, I want it to be spring. Like I can't deal with this anymore.
Yeah, and I wore my Masters pullover just because
it's
it's
week.
Warm, friendly golf with
That's
flowers and all those things. And nice music, none of which we have here.
Yeah, was I at the Masters?
It's still
I was at the
winters.
Masters last year this week.
I think
wasn't
you were
I?
there. Yeah.
Dang, why am I not there this year?
Well, because you're here.
Because I'm here in the snow.
Here in the snow. But no matter wherever you're watching, it's springtime. We hope you're having a nice warm day, or at least that you're inside. We were at the spring big deal on BYU TV Friday. We had the scrimmage and the alumni game. That was fun. We'll talk about that today.
Yeah.
Kind of like, hey, why didn't we see a whole lot from the scrimmage? We'll talk about that.
Yeah, we'll break down the scrimmage. We'll talk about the alumni game. Another last minute thriller, untimely injury to one of our favorite guests on this show, and BYU's winningest quarterback in program history, Max Hall.
Yeah, we'll roll out the scenario of how that went down.
And just,
poor guy.
Hey, we'll give you a little tease. It wasn't in the action. He didn't get hurt in playing.
But it seems about right as to how it happened.
Yeah.
Even though we're not happy that it did happen.
It's just, I feel so bad. It's a terrible injury.
Today, Greg Rubell is going to join us, radio voice of the Cougars for football and basketball and baseball and soccer. And Hans Olson, the new commentator, analyst for BYU Radio, is going to join us as well. So it's announcer night.
That's
Between
right.
the four of us, we got it all covered.
Well, and there a lot of history. If you get the four of us together, man, we can really reminisce over, because there's a lot of history between the four of us with BYU and all of the sports. So, yeah, pretty fun. Also, key dates between now and the season opener on September 2nd to mark on your calendar for BYU football. Spring ball's not over yet, even though the spring game was last week. So we'll talk about the schedule for the rest of spring and then kind of some landmark dates to put on your calendar. You check off. We're just one check closer to kicking it off and opening the first season in the Big 12.
As you're watching our show or listening to the podcast, we encourage you to follow us on Facebook and YouTube and Twitch. It's all free. Follow us there. You can sign up for our newsletter, get highlight clips from each show sent to you. That's at ysguys.com. And we've got interviews there. Everyone that we've done is at ysguys.com. Danny Ainge, Marie Osmond, Jimmer Fredette, Ty Detmer, Kyle Van Noy, Max Hall. Last week we had Elaine Bradley of the Neon Trees.
It's awesome.
It's all waiting for you at ysguys.com. I was there the other day flipping through, and we haven't even been on the air yet for a year. We've talked to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's been really fun. And every time guests come on, we learn something almost universally. With this format, they'll talk to us about something that they've never told anybody before.
Yeah, that's cool.
And something that we've never heard before. So there's some nuggets in every one of those interactions, every one of those interviews that we've had has been really fun. Through
the month of April, I want to remind you that you can get 50% off these bobbleheads at the BYU store when you go online to order them and use the promo code WISEGUYS, YSGuys50. That gets you 50% off. They're only $19.99, so these are $10 holiday gifts. You got Cosmo playing football, volleyball. You have an Elvis Cosmo over there. Blaine, you got what?
Yeah, basketball and volleyball and baseball I've got right here. So
yeah, it looks like he's.
I'm gonna raise up. This is the baseball guy.
And then you got one of he's going to throw down a hammer dunk.
And this is the soccer guy.
There's the soccer guy.
And then I've got basketball Cosmo.
So the details are all in the link that's in the chat. On the podcast, it's a link that's in the description. If you're watching on YouTube, the link is in the video description. If you're on a desktop computer, you just take out your phone, scan the QR code, and it'll take you right there. So that's good through April. Chance to get Cosmo at $10. And that's kind of cool.
Yep.
We appreciate the BYU store and having them be a part of the Wise Guys. Let's start with the spring scrimmage. We've already had a couple of comments on the live stream. It wasn't all that exciting, the 2 hours that we had. We knew it wasn't going to be because it was going to be terribly watered down. Kalani doesn't like doing them, but Jay Hill kind of talked him into it, which was great. But I don't think we saw one deep pass from Keaton Slovis outside of the first pass of the scrimmage.
Yeah, they ran about 3 plays for Keaton that they ran over and over, and then defensively they literally had 2 calls. They played man and 3 deep zone.
Yeah.
And obviously there's going to be a lot more than that. You and I talked to Keaton. Well, actually, were you out there with me when I ran into Keaton late after? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we talked to Keaton. That's right, we were together when we talked to Keaton afterwards for a while. And he says, "Yeah, we didn't do much, but we knew that that's what we were going to do. It was just great to get out here in the stadium and connect with the fans." And he stayed until everybody was gone. Yeah. To connect with BYU fans. He's
signing autographs.
He's seen the environment. He played in that environment as a USC Trojan when BYU took them down in a big upset. So he seems really impressed with the BYU fan base, and he loved the opportunity to connect with that fan base and to connect with some of the alumni, some of the great players that have come before, along with a bunch of BYU's current NFL guys. And so really that's what the whole thing was about. That's why they did it. It wasn't to showcase, hey, guess what, everybody?
Here's what we got.
Everybody that we're playing next year, here's the new talent. Here's all of the new schemes we're running, and here's a bunch of new plays for you guys to scout, and here's a bunch of new stuff we're doing on defense. I think they'd rather leave that as a surprise.
But we were kind of hoping to see a couple bombs. You know,
at least a couple of deep balls. But hey, for what it was supposed to be, for what Kalani wanted it to be, and that was kind of just like a connect with the alumni, connect with the fan base, bring the fans down on the field type of an affair, connect the past to the present with players. I thought it was big time mission accomplished in that way.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to be involved with everybody. And once the ones got off the field, I thought it got pretty interesting because everyone else could hit and tackle each other. And so I thought we did get a chance to see a little bit in the battle for the number 2 quarterback with Retzlaff and Finnegan.
Yeah.
And so I enjoyed watching those guys go back and forth.
There were some big hits out there as well. From a defensive perspective, with some of the guys that are filling in that depth chart, and so they of course they didn't let the ones versus ones hit each other, and there were several ones that we know are going to be ones that have been very limited, just outrunning Isaac Rex. Ben Bywater,
Cody
Max
Epps was in uniform, but he wasn't going to be in there.
Like these guys, a lot of these guys came out and ran through some drills, but really haven't been that involved in spring practice all along. They had a more lively scrimmage on Monday of last week. That was the last real, hey, we're tackling everybody to the ground. It's live. We're running everything. Let's see what we've got. Let's establish some positions here, 1s and 2s going into the summer workout. That all happened last Monday without the view of everyone, so they could kind of let loose a little bit more, and they let me come to that because they knew we were preparing for Friday's event. That was a BYU event. They're like, listen, we know that you need to. Typically, they don't open those, but we know that you need to be here because you need to know what's going on to be able to do this thing on Friday. And so, I was really impressed. Keaton Slovis looked really good in that scrimmage, as did Retzlaff and Finnegan. I think BYU is deeper at quarterback this year than they were last year.
I was impressed late in the scrimmage back on this last Friday when Ryder Burton came in. He's the freshman out of Springville. Graduated early so we could get into a winter semester and practice with the guys. He has a nice release. He threw some good balls, and that was his first time out at Lavelle Edwards Stadium with a BYU football helmet on, and I was impressed by him.
Yeah, the one thing you did get to see is, hey, can these guys spin it? Can they throw it? And you saw all 3 of these guys, or all 4 of these guys with the ability to throw the football. But Ryder Burton, for a 18-year-old freshman, wow. He has tremendous velocity on the ball. You can see he has good feet. His mechanics are very, very good. And people wondered, he didn't come in with eye-popping numbers, but he played in an offense down Springville where they really didn't utilize the passing game that much, right? And didn't ask him to run a pro-style type offense. But he'd been at camp with BYU on multiple occasions, and they had a chance to watch him run their stuff, and that's all they needed. They knew that he could compete. So he came in early. He's learning this offense. He's got a lot to learn because he didn't play in this type of offense in high school, but physically he's really, really gifted. And his mentality is he's kind of a workhorse, and he's a study worm. Like, he likes to be in watching film, and he's learning at a rapid pace. And I think he's going to be a really, really good player. And his mentality in terms of his confidence reminds me, it takes me back to Max Hall.
Yeah, it was just fun to watch him kind of run around and go, okay, what's this kid got in his debut, really in front of all of us.
Right.
And the cameras and things like that. Now, Kyle Van Noy worked as a sideline reporter for us.
So fun.
And one thing he pointed out was that the defense knew all the plays the offense was doing. So as a fan, as you're watching, you're going, man, why aren't they just driving down the field and doing all these? Why aren't these plays all working? Because the defense knew the checkdowns, they knew everything. And the best defensive play I thought we saw, Jacob Robinson picked off Slovis, and we know that BYU's got some returners with some vibrant personalities in that secondary that are going to be fun. He's one of them.
Yeah, and so these corners, what they're looking for now is depth, because the starters during spring ball were Jacob Robinson and Eddie Heckard.
Yeah.
Now remember, Eddie transfers down from Weber. His decision was, do I go right to the NFL right now from Weber?
Yeah.
Possibly be a late rounder or a free agent signee, or do I come down, play for Jay Hill and the guys down here that I trust, be in a P5 program, play against better talent, and really showcase my skills so that I can be a higher draft pick? So that gives you an idea of the background of Eddie, and he has not disappointed at all. He is a big-time player. He is very good. He just is a football player. And then Jacob on the other side, you know, our good friend Brian Logan that we work with on Game Day and a bunch of the shows that we have, he's helped out on After Further Review. He's been telling us since day one that Jacob Robinson has a chance to be great and be an NFL guy because of his technique, his feet, his hips, his ball skills to be able to track the ball when the ball's in the air. He goes like, this is the best guy they have. And that's been really shown up. Showed up last season. He's not afraid to come up and hit people. Then get about 10 pounds on him. He becomes a bona fide NFL guy. And now you got 2 NFL corners. I feel like BYU's going into the next fall with as good a corners as anybody has in that league. But what they need is some depth.
Yeah.
Is it more Ibamba that steps up and becomes that kind of third rotating guy? Is it, you know, there's multiple guys. There's a couple of freshmen from last year. So they're looking for the 3 and 4. But the 1 and 2 are really good. And I think that Micah has really established himself, Harper, as a bona fide, big-time, strong safety that can play at the Big 12 level. So they're in pretty good shape in the secondary.
The key going into the Big 12 is you got to have your best 11 out there. Kalani likes to say that all the time, and have them good enough to compete. But at the end, the key is to still have a team that's Big 12 in November and not have everybody hurt. And that's where the depth comes in. And that's what it might take a little bit. But I think they're going in deeper than what most thought. And when the transfer portal opens up here in a couple of weeks, they're going to get a little deeper.
Yeah, I think they'll pick up a few more bodies that can really play on the defensive side, maybe a couple of D linemen that'll be a surprise to people. And there's a couple of freshmen that are coming in. The linebacker out of was it Timpview, I think, that was the big 4-star.
Sarah?
Yeah, that may be able to play right away. That's that good, right?
Yeah, we're going to ask Hans. We'll ask Hans about what he thinks, too, on what they need to shop for in the portal.
Well, they're going to get Bywater back, and they're going to get Tooley back. And remember, the league that BYU is going to play in runs a ton of spread, throw, game. So BYU is going to play a lot of 4-2-5 stuff. You'll see a lot of nickel on the field for BYU because that's how you have to defend that kind of stuff. So I feel like they've got enough linebackers stashed away, especially when you get Max back and you get Ben back.
Yeah.
And then the 2 Kafusis, the cousins, Ace and Micah Kafusi, had a tremendous spring. A couple of freshmen that looked really, really good. You get Gagne back. It's Isaiah Glasker back. Like, I think they're in good shape at linebacker coming back this next year. We just talked a little bit about the secondary. Malik Moore now going to be back in the secondary at free that started the whole previous year before hand injury kept him out all of this last season. So, yeah, and they get a couple more pieces here in the transfer portal. When that opens back up again on the D-line actually looked pretty good during spring ball. This could be a defense that makes a statement and takes a big step forward as they go into the Big 12. And then I like the quarterback situation and the running back situation, and I think they're going to be really good on offense as well.
Some key dates to keep in mind before we bring in Hans Olson tonight. April 14th, the final practice. April 15th through the 30th, the transfer portal opens for football. Now, if you Google that, you get two answers. Some reports say May 15th to May 30th. Mm-hmm. And so I just text Brett Pine over at BYU. I said, which one is it? He says, it's April 15th to the 30th. So that's the day after the last practice. Shopping season will begin.
Yes,
the holiday season.
Back open again, right?
April 27th through the 29th is the NFL draft. On July 1, BYU officially joins the Big 12. Later that night is the Stadium of Fire, the last big event in the stadium
with
before
Journey,
there's football with Journey. AFR kicks off its 10th season on BYU TV July 25th. And then, of course, September 2nd, Sam Houston.
One thing before we get to Hans about this transfer portal thing, people are going, well, why would there be anybody left now that BYU would want? And there's a number of players that either needed to finish up a degree this semester and didn't want to alienate anybody around them. So they're like, hey, I'm just going to stay here till I finish this semester. Or for eligibility, not just necessarily to graduate and be a grad transfer, for eligibility reasons needed to stay. So there will be some quality players that will come into that transfer portal during that April 15th through the 30th time frame that BYU may be able to land.
I saw a tweet from Dick Vitale the other night. He said there's over 1,000 kids in the basketball portal right now.
Basketball is just
and
nuts.
That grows every day.
We can have a whole other show on that.
Our first guest tonight is the new analyst for BYU football broadcasts on BYU Radio, joining Greg Rubell for the Cougars' first season in the Big 12. He played defensive tackle at BYU between 1996 and 2000, proudly wore the bib uniform. Our pleasure to welcome local radio host and the newest member of the BYU broadcasting family, Hans Olson, to the Wise Guys. We're looking at number 67 from the Colts, and now here's the man who wore number 67. Welcome to the show.
Man, look at those digs, guys.
Hey, wait. First of all, I want to know if what Dave just said is even true. You proudly wore those bibs? Did you like those?
I didn't mind the bibs.
Oh, wow.
I didn't mind the bibs. I thought it was pretty original. I thought that they were, at the time, I thought they were pretty trendy. They did kind of emphasize the gut and made you look kind of chubby. A little bit too much, but at the time I didn't mind them too much.
For a guy,
I think they get more hate than they deserve.
For a guy who likes barbecue, it seems appropriate there would be a bib that would you'd just be with a bib. You can play and then you can go eat.
Dang right, man. Barbecue. Love anything that you put mustard on. Anything you can dip in ketchup. Love it all.
It seems appropriate.
You guys are looking good. What, are you in the same room? How does this work?
Yeah, we're right apart from each other.
This is like this is a studio built especially for the show. It's in a secret location. The only we could tell you at some point. Greg knows because he's here already.
Yeah, because Greg's here.
But we only give it out to certain people for safety reasons.
Because we don't want trouble, Hans. Yeah. We don't want any trouble.
And it's built specifically for the show. It's pretty fun. And
I can see the crowd storming that place.
And in the backhands, you see all of the future Big 12 represented. And so, we wanted to get this show going, so we're not quite a year into it. The year leading into the Big 12 to really make it a show all about BYU and all about the Big 12. And so studio built specifically for this.
Great, man.
It
Fantastic.
Seems appropriate that you're on with us tonight because Blaine and I called your first touchdown a fumble recovery against San Diego State. You rumbled 24 yards to the end zone in a 30-7 win. What do you remember from that moment?
Oh, man, that was a magical game, man. I had, I think, 2 sacks leading up to that touchdown, and my entire family came. Everybody was there. I've got a couple sisters in Southern California, so they brought their families, and then my mom and dad had come, and my brother, and I had an aunt and uncle there. We were just packed, and it was one of those games, Blaine, I'm sure you remember some, that everything comes together, and it just feels like nobody can stop you. The angles are right, and your energy is up, and the game plan fit what you do. And yeah, Rob Morris hit the quarterback, and the ball squirted loose, and I was able to scoop the thing and run in for it. The cool thing is some of the fallout on some of these things, people don't see some of these things that the NCAA does for these big moments like that. I actually got Player of the Week, NCAA Player of the Week, and the NCAA sent $3,000 to my high school to give as a scholarship in my name. And it's cool little things like that were kind of a fallout of that. But that was a fun game.
That's a pretty cool fallout. You know, we've had a number of your teammates on the show. It's about time we got you on the show. And we're excited about this, but we've been able to ask him this, and I wanted to ask you this because we've gotten a little bit different feel from everybody. You know, you were also in the locker room prior to that Rubell Edwards final home game against New Mexico when President Hinckley dropped in to address the team. First of all, how cool is that? And what do you remember about that moment?
I remember Rubell about 5 minutes before President Hinckley came in, grabbed me by the arm and said, "Don't embarrass me." And because he kind of had me coined as the guy that would probably embarrass him or embarrass the team. And I was just kind of locked with fear when he came in, because that was the president that I really grew up with and I had a tremendous amount of respect for. And I remember in that moment just wanting to represent Rubell well. That's really what I remember thinking. I want everything of this day to go perfectly for Rubell, because I knew that the stadium was going to be named after him. I knew that it was kind of his day, his moment. And it was my senior day as well. But you kind of just put it in the back of your mind and you think, all right, well, y'all have my senior moment with my parents. That's all that really matters. And the emphasis was on Rubell. I just wanted to make it a beautiful send-off for him because I loved him. You know, guys, when he recruited me out of Weiser, Idaho, I had a lot of different offers, and I had actually committed to Tom Osborne at Nebraska. They won back-to-back national championships. And Tom Osborne flew into Weiser, Idaho in a little Learjet and came and saw me during the onion harvest and knocked on my door at 7:30 in the morning before I went into wrestling practice and said, "Man, this place stinks like onions." And I said, "Yeah, it does." And he came in and I committed to him. I verbally committed to him that morning. And I remember thinking, I don't know if Tom Osborne's going to be there. And I remember I got an opportunity to talk to Rubell about 2 weeks after I verbally committed. And I asked Rubell, I said, "Rubell, will you be there all 5 of my eligible years? Will you be there?" And he said, "I absolutely will." And he committed to it. And I remember thinking how incredible it was that I was leaving the same year he was leaving, and he held up to that commitment. I thought that was pretty incredible. Tom Osborne would have been there for 3 years of my eligibility. And the other 4 coaches that I was interested in maybe playing for, they all left as well. So Rubell was the only one that actually stayed. So I got to spend that whole time with him. And that was in the back of my mind during that day too, thinking, how cool is this, that this guy held up his end of the bargain and kept his promises to me. So a lot went into that day.
So when President Hinckley looked at you and said, "Hans, don't muff it," he said that to everybody. You know, there's no way you could go. Now, New Mexico didn't take a knee, but there's no way you guys could lose that game.
I think I bumped our quarterback and I said, "He's talking to you." I can't remember who our quarterback was. I think it was Brandon Doman at the time.
Yeah.
And because we went through like 6 quarterbacks that year. That was a really rough season.
We talked to Brandon about. It's funny that you say that Rubell grabbed you and said, "Hey, don't embarrass me." and Hans is from Idaho, right? Yeah. He's from Weiser, and we were number 1 in the country. We had 1 game left, but we got invited as a team to go up and have dinner with the First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles up in the Joseph Smith building. I'm not sure what it was called back then. Oh, it was a Hotel Utah back then, right? And Rubell gathers the whole team around, and he's like, "Guys, we're going up. I don't want anybody to embarrass me. And guys, this is Sunday best dress." And he looks over and he goes, "Walt Manuel and all you Idaho guys, that means no bib overalls." That's what Rubell said. He always had an Idaho joke. He always had an Idaho joke up his sleeve all the time. So
hey,
was he not the best, Blaine?
He was. The people that weren't close to him and didn't get the exposure that we all did don't understand. his sense of he was the funniest person. His just kind of dry sense of humor. He would just kill you with the little dry, sly jokes, and he always had them, and he always had the right quip for the right moment, and not enough people got to see that side of Rubell. I think he had some great ones out in the media, but he was constantly doing that with us, and that was really, really fun.
Such a beautiful human being. Just from every angle, a beautiful human being, and could make you feel warm and loved, and could make you laugh your butt off, could also get your butt off a chair and get you working. And I am beyond lucky to have the times that I had with him, whether it was on air doing the Legends show with him and Ron McBride for 5 years, or I actually ended up helping him clean out his father-in-law's house after his father-in-law had passed away. And I had an opportunity to spend an entire weekend with him in a working capacity, just to learn more about him. And he loved to tell jokes, and he was a terrible driver. The worst driver I've ever met in my life.
that is all I can say to that is truth.
Didn't Patty do most of the driving?
She did a lot of the driving.
Yeah.
Hey, Hans, I was going to ask you this, the whole spring game, alumni thing, everything this weekend, when Patty, had her role at the beginning, and she was out there with everybody and walked out there with everybody, I was having a hard time keeping my composure and doing the broadcast to see Patty out there, because it was so touching and so appropriate to have her out there in his stadium, participating in that and tying the past to the present. What were your thoughts on having Patty there this last week?
I think the more Patty, the better. The more you can incorporate her, the better. And Blaine, I just about 3 weeks ago went to Winona Ramage's funeral. I don't know how many people out there know Tom Ramage, but it's hard to talk about Rubell without talking about Tom Ramage.
Right.
Tom was a defensive line coach. He was my defensive line coach, and his wife was so close to me and so close to my wife. And so my wife and I went to Winona's funeral, and while we were there, we got into a lot of different discussions with all kinds of people. Tom Homo was out there celebrating her life, and Chris Hoke, one of my old teammates, who was with the Steelers, he came back from Pittsburgh, and he and I were there together. And the conversations of Winona and Patty and those amazing women that were so integral in our growth as men, that helped us as we brought wives and started to build families, that helped us manage those relationships and set expectations. And she was so important. And Blaine, I don't know if you got married while you were playing at BYU, but Patty was so incredible. She held different cooking classes with the wives. And so Amanda would go to the cooking classes and hang out with her, and she would tell these girls what to expect from us as players and just kind of help the relationship. So when I see Patty, I just see mom. I see a woman that was so influential in my growth for the most critical 5 years of my life. So to see her on that field, anytime BYU honors her, anytime she gets any opportunity to speak, I just think people need to listen, and we need to all just love and respect everything that she gives us, and don't take her for granted right now.
Amen to that.
Because
for sure.
Winona went so fast. She didn't, in reality, she did, but it just feels like it went so fast.
New football analyst on BYU Radio, Hans Olson, on the Wise Guys tonight, live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and wiseguys.com. Before we bring in Greg Rubell, your last game in the regular season, you beat Utah up there in a dramatic come from behind. There were a group of guys that carried Rubell off the field. Were you in that pile, or where were you after you took down the Utes that night?
I'm sure I was trying to convince the guys to carry me off the field, would be my guess. Trying to pull Rubell off the top of the pile and see if I could climb up there would be my guess. No, I was under there. I was one of the guys that was hoisting him and walking away with him. But that was an insane night because we had put our hearts into it. I know I played a really good game in that game too. I had a sack and a half going into that final defensive series where after we scored, Utah had an opportunity to get back down the field. They didn't have a ton of time, but our defense, we all had to be laser focused and get out there and do it. And so I felt really good about the game, but that was it. That was the sending off point. We knew that we weren't going to be going to a bowl game. I believe it was before that game that we were told, win or lose, we wouldn't be going to a bowl game. So we kind of knew as a senior class that was it. So I'm sure Kalani Sitake and I were messing around doing something, and Satema Nali was probably singing and had his ukulele. I don't know. It's all the norms, man. It was just a magical night. That's still one of the most memorable, one of the greatest games I've ever played in.
Well, it ended right. I imagine as you're watching Doman drive the team down the field in those last few seconds, there had to be some high anxiety.
Well, first of all, Staley didn't fumble.
Yeah, there you go.
Agreed?
I agree with that.
I agree. Blaine agrees. Greg agrees. Ron McBride does not agree, I don't think. But
well, I've been doing a show with Ron McBride for the last 8 years, and let me tell you, he doesn't agree. No.
Of course not.
He 100% thinks that was a fumble, but that wasn't a fumble. Secondly, I think that Jonathan Pittman doesn't get the BYU recognition he deserves because in those two catches, he may have been the most memorable receiver in BYU-Utah history, BYU-Utah rivalry game history.
Yeah, 2 crazy catches. People sometimes forget it's not just the one. 2 catches in that game that are ridiculous, right?
Yeah, it was. It was 2 insane catches. And then Brandon Doman with the option look off the right side. Spectacular. But yeah, I don't know if you've heard the story, but I was on the sideline on that offensive drive, and I was crying, and I was going around to all my senior teammates, hugging them, telling them that it's been a real blessing playing with them for the last 5 years. And I can't believe we lost our senior year against these Utes. And we're all just going back. And one of my teammates, Satema Nali, heard me and came over and grabbed me by the face mask and started yelling in my face, you know better than that. You know that this game isn't over. And he's pointing up in my face mask and spitting across my face. And you better get ready. We're going to have one more defensive stand. This is good. We are going to score. And I'm like, Satema, it's over, man. It's over. The sooner you understand that, the quicker you can get over this terrible loss. And of course, it happened. And it was just an incredible night.
Let's have Greg hop in and join us. We got some more football questions for you. We got a lot of questions for Greg, so he can join us as we grill you a little bit, and then we'll let you go, and we'll turn the questions on him. But Hans,
very good wheels on these chairs. Like
Greg, it's good to have you in studio.
And he almost ended up in the other room.
We like to stay mobile in here just in case. We can dodge some darts.
Should I straighten up my tie for the boss? Like, I don't know.
No, you look good. He's got a sweatshirt on. We're all good.
You're already zipped all the way up. Notice that I wore my white snow shirt tonight, just like
Kevin Eubank.
just like Kevin.
Just like Kevin. Yeah, the snow coat. You got the snow shirt.
I got my snow shirt on. So,
Hans, let's talk about the NFL real quick. Let's go to December 30th, 2001. The Colts are playing at the Rams. You make your NFL debut at defensive tackle. Kurt Warner throws for 359 and 3 touchdowns. Marshall Faulk runs for 118 and 3 touchdowns. The Rams win big. So my question is, what was it like trying to defend those two?
Well, a couple of things. First and foremost, I broke my hand, a pretty severe hand injury, and that was my first game back on active roster in pads and playing. So as you mentioned, it was just an incredible night for me. And I remember a couple of things from that day. Number one, the trivia question happened to be about my Uncle Merlin, of course, being a legendary Ram. And so I'm sitting there in warm-ups, and I'm like, do I have to hear about my uncle right now? Really? I can't get away from it. Number two, I got thrown in the second quarter, and they had an offensive lineman, Orlando Pace.
Yeah.
Some might remember him.
Yeah.
And I remember I came out of the huddle and went to line up, and I heard him say fresh meat. And I was like, geez, that's That's not what I wanted to hear. And I think it was my second place scrimmage. I was able to get a hold of Falk's leg, and he carried me for about 5 years, or five yards, and finally got him down. It was just cool. I was a little bit starstruck because I watched them win the Super Bowl. You remember that Rams Tennessee Titans Super Bowl? That was a memorable Super Bowl for me. I think it was my senior year. It was the year before or 2 years before, and so I was a little bit starstruck for the moment, but. I just remember thinking, I'm finally going to get a nice paycheck out of this. That's what I was most
that's important. I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to think in my mind of the years, because Spencer Need was there plowing the road at fullback for Marshall for a couple of seasons with the Rams. I'm not sure if he was there that year when you played against him or not. Do you remember if you played against Spencer? It must have been. I think it was a year later that Spencer came.
It was a year later.
Yep.
Yeah, it was a year later. He was playing, I think, his senior year.
Yeah.
That year that I stepped on the field. Against the Rams. So I didn't know Spencer Need was running fullback for
the Rams moved him over to kind of H-back fullback, and they just said that, listen, your job, road grader, just plow the road for Marshall. He's like, that job I can do. And that's what he did. For a couple years, he made a living doing that, plowing the road for Marshall.
Hey, the next week though, you had a home game and a better outcome against the Broncos.
Yeah, I remember that game well too. Made a couple of mistakes in that game. You know what's funny? Talking about NFL time, I feel like I've got so many mistakes that all I remember is the bad times. When you're playing in the league, it's like every play you wonder. It's when you're in my position, you feel like every play might be your last. And so those games, you remember all the bad moments more than you remember the good moments. And I remember just thinking, I got to get through this rookie year. Got to find a way to scrape through this rookie year. We kind of had an idea that Jim Mora was going to be fired that year. Yeah. That was the playoff year. You guys remember playoffs?
Yeah.
Hey, we'll be lucky to win another.
That quote lasted longer than his career.
It did.
Oh man, I was in that locker room before he went to the media podium, and if you thought he was animated in the media scrum, in the locker room, he was screaming about how he's got enough money he could move to Hawaii and never have to lift a finger for himself again, because I got plenty of money, every penny you could ever imagine. I don't need you guys. I don't need this job. And then he goes to the media, and we're like, this isn't going to go well with the media.
No. Yeah. I mean, we were talking about it. Those two NFL appearances on defense, you get Marshall Falk and Terrell Davis.
Yeah.
That's like, how about that, right?
He was a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a problem. He was carrying everybody all over the field. Those are two great backs. Those were fun years to be in the NFL. It was when they moved me to offensive line that things got really hairy. Going over to the offensive line side and trying to learn Peyton Manning's offensive playbook, that was a nightmare. Holy cow.
So Tony Dungy comes in and he calls you in. He says, Hans, I know you've been on defense. I want you to move to offense. And you said,
I'd rather be a free agent, maybe move around, look for defense. I don't know if that's going to happen. And he said, I just talked to Howard Mudd. Howard Mudd believes you can do it. Howard Mudd was the offensive line coach. He's considered like the great lineman guru. In fact, if you were to talk to Coach Funk about Howard Mudd, you're going to get some gushing, because Coach Funk gets a lot of his offensive line sets from Howard Mudd. And he said, Howard Mudd believes in you, that he could change an offensive line. And I said, all right, let's go. And I'd had a lot of respect for Howard. Howard played against Malcolm Merlin back in the mid 60s and early 70s. And Howard committed to put me on that offensive line and really gave me everything he had. And I did get into that second. So it was my third year, and I got into that second year. And I just really couldn't grasp the offensive line responsibilities in that league. It's really in depth. It was really tough. I needed a little bit more offensive lineman background to be able to pick up what they were putting down. If
it was easy, more people would do it, right? And they don't do that at all.
It just doesn't happen that often.
So, hey, we brought Greg in. We're going to talk about sports radio and and radio calling the games. You host a daily radio show in Utah with Scotty G still, right? With Scott Gerard on KSLSports.com. You also start working with Greg, sitting right next to me as the football analyst for BYU Radio this fall, which we're all just pumped about. When that announcement was made, we're just so thrilled to have you down here working with all of us. What's the difference between being a radio host and now making this jump and being a game analyst on game day and working with this guy?
And just know Greg's going to answer. He's going to answer after your answer.
Yep.
Okay. So I think all three of you can really relate to this. So this game, I love this game so much. I miss playing it. There was a couple things. Number one, I couldn't play it anymore. Number two, I couldn't coach. I gave coaching a try. I can't do it. I don't like kids, and I don't like kids' parents, and I don't like coaching. So I couldn't coach. So how do you get as close as you can to the game? Well, you call the action. And I really discovered that when I started calling these bowl games, that being in the locker room and talking with the coaches and learning attributes of these players and being the in-game call where I'm watching all of the different fronts and different chess moves from coordinator to coordinator, trying to figure out how to combat. It's the closest you can get to the game without being a player on the field or a coach on the sideline. And when I got the initial call, it was the first surge because I did not want to leave this market. I want to be in this market. And I knew that if I was going to do these calls full time, it would have had to been probably out of this market. And when I got this call, I still get the butterflies thinking about that call and this opportunity because it puts me so close to the game, as you guys know.
Did Greg call? Who called you? Was it Greg that called you?
It was Greg.
So Greg, so let's hear how this.
I want to hear how this went down and what his reaction was.
You said, "Hey, Hans," and what?
Well, we're live here on a snowy night.
Yeah.
It was a snowy afternoon. It was a couple of months ago. I was driving to the Marriott Center to call a basketball game. It was on my drive to the ball game that I decided to give Hans a call. And the conversation lasted the drive, and then I parked in my spot at the Marriott Center and stayed parked for a while and talked some more. And it was a really cool conversation. And again, it was kind of out of nowhere. I've known Hans for a long time, but I'm not the kind of guy that just calls Hans up to shoot the breeze. And so when I placed the call, it was an eye-opener for both of us, I think, as to what each of us had to say and how each of us would react and respond. And I was struck by how much the idea meant to him, how much the prospect meant to him, and how earnest he was about, if this were to go any farther, about wanting it to be the right fit in every way for everybody. And I had a feeling, and I shared it with him that day, you will be absolutely the right fit. And I had that confidence from day one in talking to him that this was going to be a good decision. And so I'm just glad it progressed step by step as we went on, again, weeks and weeks later to finally get this done. But from that first conversation, that was what remained with me was earnestness and sincerity and love for the game and love for BYU and wanting to make Cougar Nation happy if this were to be the direction we go. And I felt comfortable from day one, and that comfort just increased with every ensuing conversation and text message and meeting and everything else.
How cool was it to get all that done, Hans, and then you look at the schedule, and you two get to be pioneers heading into the Big 12 for BYU's first year in the big time, and then you look at the venues, you get to go call the action in historic Texas, even Lavelle Edwards Stadium, but around that league. How excited are you? Which spot are you looking most forward to, you guys?
Oh, man. I am beyond excited to get into some of these places. So it's funny because I've got some old Colts teammates and old BYU teammates that are dispersed all across the country. And one of our first stops is going to be Arkansas.
That's a big one.
And yeah, that's a big one. That's a big one in playing the Razorbacks. My favorite all-time Colts teammate is a tight end from Arkansas named Joe Dean Davenport. And he's a chicken farmer. And Jodine and I used to sit in our lockers next to each other, and Jodine would say to me, "Hey, buddy, as soon as I get $1 million, I'm going to leave, and I'm going to buy me a chicken farm, and I'm going to farm some chickens." And he got $1 million, guys, and he was gone.
He's out
the next day.
Good for him.
He did. He took his $1 million. He went and bought a chicken farm out in Arkansas. He farms his chickens, and he's out there for every game. And he called me when he found out that I got this opportunity. And he said, "You know I'm hosting you out here, right? You're going to come out here and help me with my chickens." I was like, "I'm not helping with any chickens, but I'll come out and give you some love for sure."
That's
and
so
then,
fun.
It's exciting, guys. It's just exciting to think of Steve Sarkisian and one of my old teammates, Peyton Manning's nephew.
Yeah.
I don't know if Arch is going to be playing in that game, but the prospects of it gives me the chills. The thoughts of my old quarterback coaching my old quarterback's nephew and playing in that game is so exciting to me, to be able to call the action and to love up Steve Sarkisian as a former Cougar and knowing him the way I know him and having played that his senior year with him. And that's an exciting prospect. Guys, I think the four of us, as we sit around, it gives you the chills.
Yeah, I'm excited at T. Boone Pickens Stadium.
Oklahoma State. It's going to be a big-time venue there. They've made such great improvements to it, and that renews an old rivalry from back in the 70s that hasn't been contested for a while.
Yes.
A venue where Barry Sanders did amazing work, and we've been to Texas before, but being back at Texas as a conference colleague is a different deal. And he won't be with me for basketball, but you get to talk about places like Fog Allen Fieldhouse, bucket list items in the Big 12. So this should be a fun next few years, however long it is, for Hans and me together to check off all the boxes on all these different Big 12 venues we get to go to, and then to bring programs into Livell Edwards Stadium. Yeah. And see the Big 12 flags flying in the end zones, right, for those schools, and have different fan bases come and experience what it's like to be at Livell Edwards Stadium. Baylor, as a Big 12 colleague, most memorably and recently, had their fans come to Provo, and it was universal afterward. It's like, wow, how friendly they were, how hospitable it is at BYU, and to be able to be conference colleagues with them. So Baylor kind of set the table for, I think, the rest of the Big 12, and what a good impression BYU's put forth and will continue to put forth, I think, in years to come.
How sweet would it be at the Texas game if the Saints are off and you have Taysom come run out the alumni flag?
Oh, no, that would scare everybody.
It would be so great, it probably wouldn't happen.
There's people that still go to counseling that are Texas fans about that game down there. You realize that?
His iconic leap and all that. Wouldn't that be something?
I'm not sure Texas lets him on the sideline.
So
I think you're right.
You guys, I have a buddy that was a big time.
I kind of thought that was going to keep us out of the Big 12.
Exactly.
I thought, geez, I don't know if BYU finds their way in, man. That Texas is going to keep them arm's length, but where Texas is going to be jet, and they're like, well, okay, but we're leaving. We're out of here. We're not going to stick around for too long.
I have a buddy, you guys, that was an All-American baseball player at Texas that I work with, and we had a thing down in Texas, and he actually arranged for us to have this dinner in their donors box at the stadium. And we walked across the field, and when we got down on one side, he goes, "Hey, by the way, you know what happened right here, don't you?" And I go, "Oh, this isn't, is it?" He goes, "Yep. This is the spot where your dude leaped over our guy." Like it left a scar. It left a scar on him. And he goes, "That day left a scar on every Texas fan that is indelible. Will never be erased from our minds." So yeah, if Taysom runs out the flag, advantage BYU.
That would be something else.
I was just talking with my co-host Scotty G today, and we were laughing our butts off because we were thinking, what's the Big 12 going to think at Media Day when all of our entities show up? The Pac-12 just sat there. I remember our first year in the Pac-12. At the time, we had 3 sports stations, but we had all of our news stations. And Lane Kiffin was rotating through stations, and he yelled at Scotty, and he's like, "This is like the 3rd station." And Scotty said, "Yeah, this is your last one for the day." And then he ended up at one of our TV stations, and he yelled at the TV guy. He said, "That old Salt Lake guy, he told me that was the last Salt Lake." And this guy's like, "No, we're the TV." We, as a state, we love our college football. And I think that the Big 12, right out of Media Day, is going to see how much we love it. And they're going to get a taste for how big we make this as a state. And I'm excited for them to see how much we love football here. as Greg mentioned, the fans of these Big 12 teams getting to come into Livell Stadium, just see the magnitude, the size of it, and how fans react to it. It's going to be eye-opening for that conference, what BYU does bring to the table.
And I think, too, guys, the fan bases at the venues to which BYU will travel will be astounded by how well BYU puts fans in the stands. And it's not so much that BYU, quote-unquote, travels. It's that BYU brings people out of all these places. And these Big 12 schools are going to see this, this Royal Blue Army kind of rolling in and buy up as many seats as they possibly can to watch their guys play. And that's going to be an eye-opener, too, for some of these venues and these fan bases to see, man, this BYU program is everywhere. They're in every building.
Yeah. When Brett Yormark was here for the Baylor game, and he was on our set on game day, looking around, the weather was just right, the crowd was huge, and he was just like, man, you guys do this every week?
Yeah, that's what he said. We go, every week.
Yeah, we do. And it just blew his mind to see Livell Edwards Stadium and Cougar Nation in full force.
Yeah, we're going to be a great fit. BYU's going to be a great fit in this league. BYU already, kind of felt P5 in almost every way except the actual stamp of approval in terms of the media presence, the exposure, the attendance, the history, all of the things that make a big-time program a big-time program. BYU's had that. They didn't have the membership. Now that they have that, it kind of completes the puzzle.
Before Blaine asks you 5 questions, Hans, and then we'll let you go, let's ask you a big one here. The portal opens on April 15th. What 3 areas does BYU need to go to meet some immediate needs for September 2?
Wide receiver number 1, in my opinion. I want to see them go get some wide receiver depth. I want to see them get some real speed. So, in my opinion, wide receiver number 1. Depending on how you felt about your defensive ends through spring, your rush ability, whether it's your OE or it's your down 3, it doesn't matter. You've got to make sure you feel confident that you can get a rush in Jay Hill's defense. And if you don't feel confident, I know DNs are really tough to come by in the transfer portal. But if you don't feel confident about it, then you got to go get some rush edge pressure. You got to find it. I'm hoping it's the Bagnall kid out of Boise State, or I'm hoping that it's Ice Moa. I've got some hopes for some guys, but you've got to make sure you've got that rush come this fall. And then third, I'd probably make sure that I get the depth on corners. If I can get more corner speed, then I go get more corner speed. But I feel pretty good about this transfer running back. I heard you guys talking before I jumped on with you. I feel good about a lot of position groups, but it's those 3 that I would head straight to the portal for.
Greg, do you concur?
Yeah, I'm with him on that. I think secondary depth, it's a rarity that BYU doesn't have secondary depth issues these days, where guys get hurt and they'll be out a little while, they're out a long time, and I think you can't be too deep there. But I agree with the things that Hans said ahead of it, no doubt.
Yeah, and it's interesting before, and maybe you were listening then, Hans, we were talking about BYU feeling really, really good about their starting corners, and really still have questions about the 3 and 4.
Yeah,
and you need to have 4, right? And so maybe you find another. Yeah. In fact, the entire secondary, they feel really good about the first 4. They feel like it's a Big 12 secondary, but you got to have 8.
Yep.
You got to have 8. And so they're still trying to build depth there for sure. I think like, without saying too much, we're going to see that there's some defensive linemen that you're going to be happy about, Hans, that are going to come in the portal. I don't know anything about a lid lifter. They need a lid lifter as a wide receiver. The guy that can go, because they lose Gunner and they lose Puka. And Puka's not blazingly fast, but for some reason he could just stretch defenses. When I said they need a lid lifter, they need somebody that can get vertical down the field, that make the safeties respect and create space in the intermediate routes. And I don't know, they have some really good receivers, Keanu and I really like Chase Roberts, but I think they've got to go get a 10-400 meters guy with some size that can stretch the defense, and hopefully they can find that. And I don't know about anything like that, but I think when it's all said and done, on the defensive line, we're going to go, that was nice before that's done. So I'll just leave it at that.
Rarely does Blaine leave anything at that, and so that's significant, Hans, when he leaves that at that. So we'll watch that closely. All right, you ready for 5 questions?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Okay.
You're not even allowed
Greg,
to
you're going to get these too, but
Greg's
later.
Gonna get Hans, you're not even allowed to think about these. The first thing that comes to your mind. That's the purpose of this, because then we really get to know who you are, right?
All right.
So I've known him long enough. I think I really know who he is anyhow, but here we go. So your favorite sports movie?
What? A stumper right off the gate? Right out of the gate?
That's not that hard.
Okay, so here's the problem.
Here we go.
I don't know if Gleaming the Cube is a sports movie.
What is Gleaming the Cube? Now I'm really stumped.
Oh, are you serious?
Yeah, we're all
don't even know
stumped.
that.
Slater,
Greg, have you ever heard of that?
I've heard of Gleaming the Cube.
Okay, well, at least Greg
I haven't. Blaine and I haven't.
That's like another level.
Okay, it's Vision Quest.
Vision Quest.
The wrestling
Wrestling
movie with Journey. Journey had the big song in
See,
there.
that one we know.
Only
Yes.
the young. All
That
right.
one we know. Okay.
Journey and Madonna.
But now I'm going to have to go look
Yeah,
up
the Madonna
Gleaming
song
the
was
Cube.
good, too.
Gleaming the Cube. I'm
It's
writing
a
it down.
wrestling
Cube is a skateboarder movie, isn't it?
Vision Quest is a wrestler.
No.
Gleaming
Gleaming the
the
Cube.
Cube is a skateboard.
Yeah.
Okay, that does skateboard. Okay, I'm not
Gleaming.
like.
Let's just move on past
Hey,
Gleaming the Cube.
I'm going to tell you guys. I get
Oh my
criticized
gosh,
for my
we've got a
movie
graphic
takes.
up.
We got a graphic up. There it is.
When
It's right
getting
over your
even
face, Hans.
means
Gleaming the
risking
Cube.
it all. Gleaming
I
the
get
Cube.
criticized for my movie takes all the time. People hate the movies that I
DJ,
love.
did you do
but
that? Did you come up with that?
Nice job, DJ.
Way to go,
He
DJ.
may as well have gone over the top with Sylvester Stallone on that one. On a
Serious.
sports movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, let's go with Vision
That-
Quest.
Okay, we're gonna go with Vision Quest. So, favorite singer or band?
Neil Diamond.
All right, that's classic.
Yeah.
So,
Neil Diamond.
there's a new musical in Broadway.
Broadway.
New
It's gotta
Neil
be
Diamond.
awesome.
And
Yes, and my one of my very best friends, that is his best friend from high school. The guy that plays Neil Diamond is from Utah.
yeah, he's a Hale. So like it's
Yes.
it's Will and
And it's called A Beautiful Noise.
yeah,
I
it's a
think.
beautiful
Yes.
noise. You gotta go see that. I've heard
that's gonna be good.
phenomenal things about it.
So I'm gonna go see it, and I've been to 3 Neil Diamond concerts, and when I was with the Colts, I got 2 tickets to Neil Diamond from our GM and Bill Polian, and I asked him 2 months in advance. He goes, just get to me a week before. I went to him a week before. He said, just tell me day of. I told him day of. He gets me 2 tickets, and they actually placed 2 chairs right in front of Neil. And so my wife and I got to sit right in front of Neil.
He was serenading
the entire
you?
evening.
Neil was serenading you the whole time?
Serenaded this whole time. And so he dotted his head with his hanky, and he threw his hanky, and it went over my head, and I went to reach for it, and I fell over these older ladies that he was throwing it to, trying to get his hanky. And then he just finished singing Heartlights. And, after he does Heartlights, I don't know if you guys have been to his concert.
No, but we'd love it.
After he does Heartlights, everybody goes dead quiet because it pulls such emotion. Even though it's a tribute song
From
to
E.T.
To E.T.
which is bonkers. Yeah. It's still an emotional drain. So the entire room, all 30,000 45-year-old women were dead quiet. And I yelled at the top of my lungs 3 feet away, "I love you, Neil." I'm 3 feet away from him. And he got on the mic and he pointed at me. He goes, "I love you too, man."
oh,
And, yeah, it
that's a
was.
special
How about
moment.
that?
Hey,
It
and
was one of those moments in your life where
Hans, I'm glad you see when I threw out the musical thing, I'm glad you were right on top of that, and I'm glad you gave Will Swenson a little pub. So Will's local. He's a
Yes.
Hale, like all the Hale theaters, the Hale Center
Yeah.
Theater in Orem, the big ones up in Salt Lake City. That's his family. Will's married to Audra McDonald, who's one of the biggest Broadway female stars of all time, multi-Tony Award winning. She's also the voice of, is it Mrs. Potts in the Beauty and the Beast?
I believe it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
but anyhow, so we'll give Will a little pub there. I'm glad you did that because that's a big deal, and you got to go see that musical. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I will.
It's pretty cool. So
Let us know what you think of it.
Yep.
We'll have you
will.
back on as a reviewist.
Yep, we'll have you. Yeah, we'll bring you back on and review. I had Dave review Moulin Rouge because he went and watched Libby in Moulin Rouge, and
Yeah,
he
that's
liked
fun.
it. He's until then until I dragged him.
No, I've been
to
to a few Broadway plays in New York, but not one like that. That was something else.
Yeah. So
that was great.
we took him there. Okay, favorite breakfast cereal.
Checks.
What do you mean checks? Like rice checks, cinnamon checks.
Yeah, which checks?
Just rice checks.
Just rice checks.
I soup it up a little bit, but I take the regular rice checks. I hit it with some honey.
Okay, now we're talking.
Yeah, and some vitamin D milk and a banana.
Okay, now I'm okay with that, because to me, rice checks just taste like hay, like alfalfa. And like you have to put 6 tablespoons of sugar. Yep. But now that you added the honey and the bananas, I'm all in on that. That's okay.
Yeah, it's dynamite.
I would also say you could probably add a few blueberries to that, and it would be really, really good, that mix.
That would knock it up a notch.
So, okay. Rice checks it is then. Okay, your favorite uncle. Is it Merlin or is it Orrin?
Orrin.
It's Orrin.
It's not even close.
Not even close.
Orrin is a legend, man.
So I've only met Merlin a couple of times, but I love Orrin. I got to tell you, I love him.
Orrin's a boss.
Yeah.
And I've always told Orrin, if he could just get me into heaven, I'm like, Orrin, I know you've earned like 5 or 6 different free entries into heaven, because he served at least 24 missions.
Is that right?
He just wrapped up his 25th with his wife, Sandy. And I'm just begging him, when you get there, please just say, I know Hans is a crazy maniac, but I've worked really hard to get him into heaven. So Orrin by far.
Merlin, Utah State, Outland Trophy, one of the greatest defensive linemen in the history of the game, arguably the greatest, right? Orrin chose the right school, went to BYU, played center at BYU, all conference, all WAC back in those days. I love Orrin Olson. One of my favorite people. So, okay. Favorite life-saving story?
Have you heard this one?
Yes, I've heard this one. That's why I asked it, because we want you to tell about when you saved a life of a drowning motorist on November 5th, 1996.
Greg, have you heard about this?
I did, yeah. You were playing for BYU at the time. This was a big deal.
Greg knows your whole file.
If this had happened in the social media era,
oh my gosh,
you'd be like Superman.
Like you would have got an NIL deal out of this alone.
All right, so lay it on us.
So I'll make it quick. And it happened to be me and Orrin, and it was November 5th, and it was a crazy winter like this. We had insane snow. And Orrin wanted to go fish the southeast end of Deer Creek, where that inlet comes down, where the road kind of bends up. Mm-hmm. And his father-in-law was longtime track coach, Coach Robinson. And he came out with us. And I told Orrin, I'm like, it's too snowy, not doing it. And Orrin's like, you're crazy. I already bought your fishing license. I'm going to get you.
That's Orrin. He bought the fishing license.
He comes and picks me up against my will. And we go out to the fishing spot. We get there like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. And we're fishing this stream that falls into Deer Creek about 50 yards away from the road. And probably 7:30 in the morning, sideways snow, freezing cold. Orrin had fallen in, so he had one leg that was soaked up to his hip. And I don't even know why we're out there, but we hear this screeching tires come off the road. And one of those old power wagons, you remember the power wagon Rams or whatever it was?
Yep.
Comes flying off the road. And it starts into a cartwheel spin. So the front's hitting and then the back is hitting. And it's just this cartwheel spin. And it comes about 50 feet down this hill and lands upside down in this huge pond of water that's just below the road. And you could see the tires sticking up. And I thought there's just, when you see that, you don't think there's anybody in the truck. There's nobody in the truck. There's no way there's somebody in the truck in that freezing cold water, underwater. It's just not happening. So I thought he got thrown out. I'm looking all around. My Uncle Orrin was actually the tough one. And he jumped in the water and he's yelling at me, I think he's in the truck. And I was like, no, I don't think he's in the truck. I don't think he's in the truck. And the horn starts honking under the water. If you hear this,
man. Yeah.
And he said, he's in the truck. And so Orrin goes down kind of under the water. The water was just up about to his face, and he's reaching in the truck trying to
ice cold water.
This guy.
Ice cold water.
November
ice cold water.
Right.
And he gets a hold of this guy, and this guy kicks him away. And so Orrin pops his head up and he says, get down in here. He's fighting me. And I was like, what? Who would fight you? He's a monster. So I jumped down in the water, and he said, on the count of 3, we're going to go in and we're going to grab this guy and we're going to get him out of his truck. I said, okay. He said, 1, 2, 3. And we reach in, we both grab this guy and we pull him to the window, but the window had smashed down. Probably it was like a 10, 12-inch opening. And we grabbed this dude, and both of us, big old monsters, were heaving and hoeing on this guy. I thought we were going to pull him out piece by piece. Finally got this guy out. His name is Tom Swan. He's like 6'6", 380 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
A massive dude. And we get him out, and the 3 of us are standing there frozen, soaking wet, looking at each other. And Tom's looking at us like, what? And Oren goes, why'd you kick away from me? And he said, because you pulled me from my air pocket. His air pocket was up by the floorboard. Because the truck was upside down, and he was breathing the air up by the floorboard, and he was getting pulled underwater and away from his air. And so he was kicking away, and he got a big gulp of air when we pulled him through. And the only thing that was wrong with him was a little scratch on his hand.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Wow.
that was it. That was it.
Do you have a relationship with him today?
Yeah, we do. He came to my wedding, and he's stayed close through, my time in the NFL and
Awesome.
my broadcasting. And I haven't touched base with him in a little bit, but he had, I believe it was 5 daughters, and he's just a great family man.
Wow.
Unbelievable story. Yeah.
That makes you Superman.
That thing would have been viral. That story would have been viral in today's social media world, but not enough people.
Well,
so now all of our folks are going to hear about it, which is great.
Do you guys remember the radio, like Harvey?
Paul Harvey. The
Harvey?
rest of the story.
And now the rest of
Yeah.
the story.
I remember listening to that, getting my hair cut at the
Paul
BYU
Harvey,
barber
wasn't he from like
on Saturday
Arizona? He
mornings.
lived like down the street from Danny Ainge when he and Michelle were living in Arizona, I think.
And
Yeah.
now
Oh, really?
you know.
Classic storyteller.
Yeah.
He did that whole story as that, and that's the rest of the story.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Oh wow, yeah, that's
And
very cool.
I still have it on cassette tape. In fact, I think it might be my mom and dad's most proud moment. Not that I saved somebody, but that Paul Harvey said their son's name. I think that was
He was
a
big
big
time.
moment.
That's
Yep.
great.
He would wrap it up with, I'm Paul Harvey. Good day.
Yeah, he was good.
Yeah.
He's a classic. He was a classic. So we gave you 5, but I'm going to give you one bonus question. We'll give you a 6 because you're all the guys that played for Livell are special. They get a 6th question, and that is your favorite piece of advice that you ever got from Livell.
Oh man, favorite piece of advice that I got from Livell. Holy cow! I've got a lot of advice from Livell, but I remember getting pulled into his office my senior year. I had gotten a couple of Senior Bowl invites to go play at the Blue Gray and to go play at the Gridiron Bowl. And I was sitting down with him, and obviously my football career was just up in the air. I was a 6th, 7th round rated free agent. And he leaned across and he said, I want you to play this game as long as you possibly can. And I said, okay. And he said, play and play and play, because you'll have your whole life to work. So play this game and play with energy and keep your passion and have fun and play this game. And I actually really applied that through my time in the NFL and my time in the AFL. I played nearly as long as I could. I did walk from the AFL on my time, but the broadcast had come and it was a great opportunity to transition. And I still haven't worked. So I just talk about football instead of playing it, still taking his advice. But I thought that was great advice, and advice that I'm sure would really resonate with you guys, that you only get a small window to play this amazing game and to be a part of it. And Livell's advice was, do it as long as you possibly can, because there's a lot of life to live after it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad he gave me that advice.
Yeah, I am too. Now you get to play with Greg Rubell, and it's the same game, just a little bit higher up in the
Hans
stadium.
is one of those guys that can say he's just loved what he's called work has never really been work, right, Hans? Your whole life.
Man.
It's a blessed life when you can do what you love your whole life.
I can't even believe
I know Greg
what
would
I
say
get
the
to
same
do.
thing, and I get to say the same thing, and Dave gets to say the same thing, right?
I can't even believe what I get to do. And Greg talked about that first conversation that we had. I still get chills thinking about being in the booth and seeing the coin toss and getting to help break down what BYU's doing in their front alignments and what BYU's doing in an effort to change their protections to solidify the pocket and what they're doing in motion and some of the differences from the 2022 defense to the now Jay Hill defense. It gives me chills to think that I'm going to be doing that and getting paid for it and hanging out with Greg and being able to bring that passion to BYU fans. It's not work, man. It is just going to be
fun.
pure joy.
Greg and I and Dave have all said to each other at one time or another, man, this is so amazing. We would probably do it for free. And then we go, shh,
Don't tell anybody.
Don't say that to anybody.
Because they'll take us up on
Don't
it.
say that out loud. Don't let that get out. Whatever you do, right?
You know, anybody who's heard Hans over the years or watched him or seen this segment even tonight, you know, it's pretty evident of what he's going to bring to the radio airwaves as a BYU analyst. And I have what I call the 3 Ps of play-by-play, but I think they kind of work for analysis too. And he's the embodiment of these. And my 3 Ps are passion, preparation, presentation. Passion, preparation, presentation. Hans has the passion. That drives him. You can tell. Preparation, no one prepares like he does. No one breaks it down like he does. He sees the game in a unique way. And the presentation is who he is, who you hear through the mic and over the headset. And so he aces all 3 Ps. And that's why he's going to be a great game analyst for Cougar Nation. I can't wait to get the season started. And I'm so glad that this relationship exists now. Because again, till that first telephone call, we knew each other. We'd be around each other. Since I covered them, we'd see each other. But we weren't partners, right? And now we're already partners, and it feels great already. And I think it's a unique relationship. Blaine and Dave, you guys speak to it as well as any. When you have a broadcast partner you're with, and you spend as much time together and as much time on the air together and off air, it becomes a special and unique bond. And I can't wait to spend time with Hans.
Hey, the beauty of this extended winter is the off season's going to seem really short.
That's right.
And you guys will be on the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Greg, thanks for your endorsement, brother. Thank you for your endorsement, and thank you for this opportunity. And all I can do is try to make you proud and make BYU fans proud and make my family proud. And that is what I'm committed to doing. And I cannot wait. It's going to be incredible. And you're right, Dave. It's going to shorten this off season a little bit. Spring ball flew. I can't believe how early they started. Now you got 3 practices left. I'm going to get out there on Monday and try to pick up a couple things, but we'll be jumping into fall camp before you even know it, guys.
Yeah, it seems like it'll be barely ski season, and then we'll be doing football. Although you can't go skiing because there's too much snow.
Yeah.
When have we ever had that?
My kids were going to go skiing today. I came home from work, and I'm like, I thought you were going to go skiing. They go, yeah, we can't. Too much snow.
Too much snow.
That's happened a couple of times. That's when you know you have a wacky year, when you can't go skiing because there's too much snow. Yeah. So,
Hans, welcome to the family. We look forward to having you on this show a lot, and certainly we look forward to your review of It's a Beautiful Sound by Neil Diamond.
When I got to go see whatever
And we'll
that
break down the curves as we head into
skateboarding movie.
Dave's going to start Gleaming the Cube tonight.
Gleaming the Cube. I'm going to go watch that.
I don't know if I'm cool enough to even watch that movie, but I'm going to give it a shot.
If we do watch it, it may raise our coolness, whatever it's called.
Hans, thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Hans.
Thanks, guys.
See you, Hans.
We'll see you, brother.
The great Hans Olson. And I think he's going to be a blast to work
you're gonna
with.
Have some fun with Hans.
So how do you develop the chemistry before just showing up on September 2nd? Or can you?
No,
There's no simulated games.
No, I just think you just have to know how you are with a guy and how a guy's going to be with you and the audience. And you know, I get asked a lot, you know, when you know, whether it was from Mark to Riley or Riley to Hans, do you want to do practice games with the guy? Do you want to do, and I've never been a simulation guy. I've never been one of those guys that can say, let's bring a guy in and watch a screen and call some plays. I just kind of feel, it is a feel thing for me. It was with Riley and it is with Hans. But I don't think I don't think we made anything other than a great decision there.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
I think it'll be fantastic. Hey, go ahead.
I was saying, when I was calling a game at Tennessee with Steve Stallworth, former UNLV quarterback. UNLV was playing Tennessee. In the booth next to us was Jim Nantz and Terry Donahue, and they were trying Donahue out because the following week was the CBS game, Tennessee and Florida. So they were doing that.
A practice game.
So Jim must not have had the feel for Terry, and he didn't do it for very long that you have for Hans. But when you said that, the only time I can remember someone doing a practice game, I'm like, really? You guys are here doing a practice game? And they were.
I think Hans is going to hit it out of the park. I think it's going to be great.
It's going to be fun. Well, we've got Greg just on our own here now without Hans. We need to reintroduce Greg.
Should we do that?
Everybody, yeah. So
our friend Greg Rubell's been behind the mic calling BYU sports since 1996 as basketball play-by-play voice, and 2001 as the radio voice of BYU football, also the voice for BYU baseball and women's soccer. Right now preparing both mentally and physically for BYU's first season in the Big 12. So, what were you worried about the most when the legendary play-by-play man Paul James retired with Livell back in 2000, and the microphone, as it were, was handed to you, when most of our lives we had only heard Paul James?
Well, first of all, I don't know that I would have gotten the opportunity when Paul James stepped down in 2000 had he not had an issue in 1996 that put me in his spot
heart?
for 6 weeks. Right.
Right.
He had that heart issue. Yeah. So he was on the sidelines for 6 weeks, and I was an emergency fill-in. I got to do one BYU football game, the WAC title game against Wyoming in 1996 in Vegas.
That. Yeah.
And I got all the basketball games he missed over that month and a half, 2 month span where he was recovering from 6 bypasses surgery. So I was the emergency fill-in. I'd never called a game of any kind at any level.
Not even hockey?
Nothing.
Wow.
The only thing I had done was been his sideline guy since 1992. So I'd had those years on the crew with Paul. So I got to get the sense of how to do the job by wearing the headset and the jetpack and being on the sidelines and being part of his pregame, in-game, halftime, postgame coverage. I got to be around him and sense how it's done. But I'd never called a game at any level. I had the experience of learning how to do it by listening, but that's it.
Yeah.
So, and guys, there are so many days that I wear the headset down there, and I would think about what he did, and I would tell myself, I could never do that. Just too hard.
Yeah.
He's so good at it. I mean, I'm still trying to, follow the ball and find out where it's going. He's already made the call, and I'm just trying to catch up in my mind with what he's calling. I thought, how amazing is that? And I really did have that prevailing thought, I could never do this. It's just so difficult, and he's so good at it. So that's the prevailing thought I had, and suddenly, the pregame of the 1996 BYU-Utah game, he's up in the booth at then Rice Stadium. I don't think it was Rice Eccles yet, Rice Stadium. And we're in the pregame. And our engineer, John Donnell, the late great, not great, he's not late, he's great. John Donnell, KSL engineer, was our football engineer, spoke down to me in my headset and said, you might need to get up here. This is during pregame of the BYU-Utah game. And I said, what's going on? He goes, well, Paul's having something, an episode, something's going on with Paul. Just be ready. And I clearly wasn't ready. And as it turned out, Paul decided he would carry on with the game. They had done, they assessed him during, paramedics came to the booth. And the EMTs assessed his situation and said, Mr. James, you've had a cardiac issue here. You need to get to a hospital. He's like, well, this is the BYU-Utah game.
Yeah, you can't leave that.
I feel I'll take a couple pills and I'll do the game and I'll check myself in after the game, but I'm not missing this game. And sure enough, he did not miss the game. And I think there's probably there's video of the telecast that day showing PJ in the booth, and they kind of told the story on the TV side of what the radio guy had gone through just to call the game. So Paul calls the game, and thankfully for him, I think, and all of us, it wasn't a dramatic game. It was kind of a blowout for BYU. Mm-hmm. They ran the ball forever, threw the ball like 12 times.
Yeah, I remember them asking Norm after the game, why did you keep running? He goes, because they couldn't stop us.
I think literally Sark was maybe 7 for 12 that day.
It was crazy.
Just ran the ball for 400-odd yards, won the game easily. And Paul does go to the hospital right after. And they do a quick assessment and say, you need sextuple bypass surgery ASAP. And so he calls me from the hospital and says, Greg, I've got a heart issue. I'm going into surgery. We've got a game at Seattle, BYU and Utah, or BYU and Washington basketball here in 2 days. You got to call the game. So Paul basically kind of put me on a plane and said, go. And that was it. for me. So that was the start of it. I had never called a game, and yet I was on a plane Monday. Paul Ruffner, his broadcast partner, was, kind enough to stay with me for those few games and work with me. But I called my first ever game of any kind as an emergency fill-in for Paul James at University of Washington on a Tuesday night in early December of 1996, and that was the 1-25 season for BYU.
Yeah, did you get to call the Utah State game that
did.
they won?
Yeah, Paul didn't get any
There
wins.
you go.
I got the one win.
How much fun was that?
That was, in the end, it was really fun. That was all we got. But my first game I called, BYU lost 95-44.
Oh, brother.
A 51-point loss.
That is not easy to call.
And there were a lot of big losses to come that year. And, of course, Roger gets let go a few games into that, and then Tony Ingle comes on. That was my entree to play-by-play. And after that year, so Paul came back in 6 weeks, and then he made the decision at that point that he would do home games, I would do road games to end the year in basketball. Right. So I got those 6 weeks, everything. Then we split home road. Then he said after that season, I'm football only.
Yeah.
So by saying I'm football only, that gave me a few seasons of basketball to hopefully get a little better at the craft, to where when he stepped down in 2000, I might have made more sense as a fill-in because I'd had some reps. But if he'd gone full health to 2000 and said he and Livell were gone at the end, who's to say that KSL doesn't open up a nationwide search and bring in somebody? And I'm not the guy because I didn't have the reps, but I got reps thanks to that situation. And the old luck is preparation meets opportunity situation. Kind of, I had some preparation, I had an opportunity, and that was an element of luck in my career.
I called UNLV football for, I think, 10 years while we were in the Mountain West, while that was going on. So I know what it's like to call losing seasons. And there were seasons where we didn't win.
But UNLV football, BYU basketball.
Your first season, 25 losses and the one win. I remember, and I'll ask you, I remember tears came to my eyes as I'm calling San Diego State's down in Vegas to win the WAC and go to their first Holiday Bowl, and they miss a field goal, a chip shot, and they had like the best kicker in the country, and UNLV won, and they carried Jeff Horton off, and that was 1-11, I believe, that season. Mm-hmm. I remember getting emotional because I knew how much it meant to all those guys and how hard losing was. And so you go through 1-25 season, and then you see it get turned around. You can't help but be emotionally connected to the outcome.
And for your situation there, the one win came at the end. Yeah. Right? So but BYU's one win came pretty early in the 1-25. There were a lot of losses still to come, and that's why I was just so grateful to Tony Ingle for a first-year play-by-play guy to deal with a losing team. To have someone like that be the guy you've got to work with and deal with, I mean, there could be no better situation.
Was he one of the most positive people you've ever been around in your lifetime?
He made it as enjoyable a 1-25 years it could possibly be. Right. Because of who he was and how he was and how he treated me and made me feel like I was going to be okay at this. And so Tony was... I mean, he was the saving grace of that season for me. And although it didn't work out for him to continue with BYU, I certainly didn't stop following Tony Ingle. Mm-hmm. And to see the career successes he had down the line was so rewarding. And there were so many cool little mini stories and things that happened with Tony's life that brought me reflecting to that 1-25 season and how pleasant he could have made it for a very unpleasant situation. I was really blessed.
Yeah, Tony Ingle, one of the great human beings ever. Yeah. Like, what a great human.
And it's funny, late in that year, it was a Billy Tubbs TCU team, and they swept BYU that year. But down at Fort Worth, they were smoking BYU. We were getting drilled, and he decided to keep his starters in until they got to 100. That was a big deal to him.
Oh, my goodness.
And,
sounds like Tubbs.
Yeah, and BYU, there was no chance BYU was going to compete in that game, and yet he wanted his starters in to get to the 100. And Tony said after the game, I've got a long memory. And years later, Kennesaw State played Billy Tubbs' Lamar team in a tournament in Alaska, I think. And they were head-to-head for the first time since that game, I think, and Tony's team won.
Oh, man.
And I texted Tony that night, and I said, do you remember? And he said he did. And it was kind of a cool moment because, and again, he's not a vengeful guy, but it was just kind of funny that Billy kind of kind of turned the screw a little bit that night when he didn't need to, and it was fun to see Tony kind of get one back years later. And
I wish I would have watched that game just for Tony.
What goes around always comes around.
Always comes around. Yeah. So Dave's done a lot of radio. I've done a little bit of radio and mostly television.
And it's funny. I hate to interrupt you, but we would go to Vegas and call the games there, and we'd have the opposing play-by.
Yeah.
And so Dave would be on our air as the
I'd pop in
play-by-play.
there in a UNLV shirt.
Yeah, he'd get the red sweater.
Give the
Yeah,
UNLV
yeah.
preview.
I'll tell you something funny about that. All UNLV fans knew I was from BYU, and they were fine with me calling the games, except for that game where they just never felt like
They didn't
I
feel you
was
were
as
all in?
excited for UNLV as I was for BYU. And I'm like, you always hear what you're listening for sure.
Right.
But I was sitting there thinking,
Dave recruited me to come down and do, when he started to go over and do some of the TV stuff for UNLV in the preseason football and basketball. He vouched for me, and we got to do a bunch of UNLV
so
stuff.
John
together.
Robinson surrounded by BYU guys were
Yeah.
like, hey,
It's like-
that's that.
And Jay Rob's like, hey,
who we
I
are.
like BYU guys. I like BYU because he had a close relationship with Fred Whittingham back in the day. And Jay Rob's like, yeah, I know Mormon guys. I know BYU guys. You guys are great.
He's really good to us.
I cut you off. I'm sorry. Blaine.
No, I was just going to say, so radio, it's a different animal than television. In television, we're kind of watching a screen. We know everybody else is watching that screen. We don't want to say too much because people can see so we're trying to augment that a little bit. But in radio, you have to paint the picture. Like, they can't see it. And so you've got to paint it for them so everybody in their mind's eye can watch that game in their head as you're calling. That's a lot of responsibility to be able to come up with the words game after game to paint that picture so people can visualize that game in their mind. How do you do that? And how fun is it knowing that you have that responsibility?
Yeah, it's been a great career-long challenge. And you say, there's a worry about maybe saying too much. And my worry is, I can't say enough. I've got to hopefully get as much detail into the call as I possibly can. And that's the career-long quest, is to try and find different ways to say the same thing. Find interesting and unique ways to describe places on the floor, places on the field, the way things are done. And so, yeah, every game for me is the chance to be a little bit better and be a little bit different and find something new to give the audience. And that's why I'm always listening to a lot of play-by-play when I drive around to and from games. I'm listening on my Sirius XM to other calls of other games to try and find out who out there is doing those things and what kind of things are being said. What can I maybe borrow and incorporate? Kevin Harlan is a great TV play-by-play guy. He's a great radio play-by-play guy.
Great.
He's known because people see him and they know who Kevin Harlan is. He calls a lot of radio games, and I don't know that anyone is as good of modern-day broadcasters at putting more detail into a call than Kevin Harlan. And every time I listen, I'm amazed and pick up something else that I would never have thought to describe that he does. The way a quarterback's towel flaps off his belt, and the way he licks his fingers before taking the snap. Things that and he's squeezing these things into a call, and I'm just always blown away. He's so good at it. And that's what I, strive to be, is good at incorporating as much detail as possible without overloading the audience, making it too cluttered, and still giving space for someone like Hans to do his job and shine in his own way. And every sport has its own unique rhythm. And so that's the great thing, too, is calling 4 sports. You have 4 different ways to call a game and 4 different ways to incorporate a broadcast partner, and ideally 4 different ways to please an audience. But the great thing about radio is that you are everything to that listener. I was at the airport last night with baseball. We were coming back from, where were we?
We were
It's
in
Pullman.
Washington.
That's right. We were in Spokane.
I'm imagine the weather wasn't much better than this, was it?
No, we were delayed last night getting
Yeah.
out of Spokane. And we were talking to the baseball staff and I, and Trent was talking about that same, Trent Pratt, about the suspense builds when you're listening to a game on the radio driving and you're waiting for the play to transpire, and you've only got the guy, and so he says it's an emotional connection to a broadcast when that's everything for you. You can't see it happening.
The phrase, you hang on every word,
Yeah.
you have
Right,
to.
yeah.
Right? It's awesome.
Yeah.
How
It's
many
an awesome medium.
How many games do you think you've called?
I don't know. I had a
Like
list.
ballpark it.
Probably between 1,000 and 1,500, something like that. I used to have, I've got to update it. It's been a few years. I had a list going for a while where the different sports I called, I had my season by season totals, but I haven't gone to it for a few years, but I probably need to.
So probably 1,500. Probably a
Brenda
Yeah.
helped me calculate once, and it was a few years ago, and we had passed 1,000. I'd passed 1,000. She didn't
Yeah.
pass 1,000, although she calls them right alongside me. But
Yeah.
but I'd passed 1,000. We need to go back and count them up.
Yeah,
too.
I'm going to do that. I know that BYU gave me a nice recognition when I hit 200 football games.
Yeah.
That's kind of a big number, and I'm probably closer to 300 now with football. I'd like to get to 400. That seems to me like kind of a milestone number
Yeah.
for the longer-term
'Cause
broadcasters.
football, when you think about football,
It's 12,
max
13 a
you
year.
have 13, 14
Right,
and
so-
1 1 year.
so you're
14
talking-
and 1 year.
So you're talking about 30 plus years of doing that
Right.
to get to 400. So,
Right.
but I will go back and maybe, but I haven't done it for a few years. But it's a big number.
So
Yeah.
we probably estimate 1,500 maybe.
Yeah. So before you tonight announce your top 3 of all time, let's run over a couple of...
By the way, can I just say how patently unfair it is?
It's terribly unfair.
To try and go
but
to
I
3.
gave you a day's notice.
Yeah, I know. He's never made me do that.
I get my
which I'm not
3,
going to.
but then I got the second 3.
Well, let's make it even a little harder. Let's talk about a couple that could possibly be in the top 3, and then we'll have you announce your top 3. But of course, back to Harleen, which we relived a little bit with the alumni game last week, as Beck and Harleen were back together on the field. That one was. And don't spoil it for us if that's in your group, because we're just going to go down a list.
Some ideas, and we're having people think, "Oh yeah, that might be my favorite."
But that one was
we're let you pick
that
yours.
one was pretty cool for a variety of reasons, and it's the start of a play. What's great about sports is you start the play with no idea how it's going to end, and then it ends in such sensational fashion.
Right. That was we're not spoiling.
No, you don't spoil it.
No.
All right, then we'll just move on to the next one.
So how about the Mangum Miracle? He and I were standing right on the sideline for that, right where it happened, where Tanner at Nebraska completes the ball to Matthews. This is 2015.
How was that one for you?
Yeah, is that?
It's up there.
Yeah, there you go.
Jeez, I didn't know we were just listing his top 3.
We're like watching it, and
suddenly this isn't very hard.
He goes, he caught it, and I go, was he over the goal line? We both go, we don't know.
Yeah.
And the official,
had to wait.
They're going, we're going to have to wait till they,
And just before that, we were sitting there going, man, these things never happen to us. Not since 1980 have these things happened for us.
Right.
And they got it.
And then it did.
And that was before, like, in our broadcast in the alumni game the other day, Kyle Van Noy is the only guy that say, well, the reason Matthews just dropped that because the shorts are too high.
He did go shorts.
Maybe some truth to that.
Yeah.
So now Luke Staley's touchdown run to beat the Utes
2001.
in 2001, and that brought the house down. And I'm going to assume that's not in your top 3, so tell us what you remember about that.
Near disaster.
Oh, no.
Okay.
See, this is why we ask these kind of hard-hitting questions.
You all know that the press box glass is pretty thick at LaVell Edwards Stadium, right?
Yeah.
Thank goodness it is, because I pumped my fist as he went down the sidelines and I hit the glass.
Oh, no.
Okay, my
It's
knuckle,
also tempered. It's
my
the second
knuckle,
tempered.
my knuckle starts to bleed. Like I punched the glass, not thinking. I mean,
In jubilation or what?
No, I was just fist pumping in jubilation. And I hit the glass, and so much that it injured my knuckle as I'm calling the play. But there are press boxes where glass breaks, and you've seen. I mean,
Right, they just fall right down onto people.
right, if it's the wrong kind. And so that was what I remember from that was, first of all, the place shook.
Yeah.
And again, the windows don't open at LaVell Edwards Stadium. We are insulated from everything, but even through the crowd mics, it was as loud as I felt I'd ever heard that place, and the place was shaking. And I hit that glass and just was so glad that was the thick stuff, because there are press boxes where it's thin glass, and it could have been a really bad situation.
If that was Wyoming, that glass is gone.
Yeah. So, and
I'm just
thought
saying
about that. Yeah.
Not that Wyoming's press box is old.
I was in the media room I stayed in the media room to watch the end of that game. It was on ESPN2 when they had the funny logo. Just before the Hasim Rockman-Lennox Lewis fight at Mandalay Bay, I think it was. But I wasn't leaving, and it was just one, I can't believe he went untouched for 30 yards in a play where it didn't even look like he was open when Doman pitched it to him.
It was a short side pitch.
Yeah.
And how did he have the room to run that? I mean, he sped down. It was an amazing play.
Amazing.
Yeah. It's Luke.
All right, let's go to this next amazing one.
Yeah, we can talk about Luke.
This could be on the list.
So we're talking about the Hill Leaps Texas 2014 run. We kind of talked about that.
He hopped right in front of us. We're down there at the 10-yard line, but you had to describe it.
Yeah, I remember just screamed hurdle. I think my voice cracked on that. Yeah, it's a hurdle. And you didn't expect it.
One of the most memorable plays in BYU history for sure.
And sometimes you sit there and go, "Can I believe? I can't believe what I'm seeing, but I have to describe it."
Yeah, and I hope I did a good job with it.
Yeah.
That was fun.
That was a good one.
All right, let's go to Jaron Hall, leading BYU past Utah. A day after getting invited to the Big 12.
Yeah, so
a lot of emotion.
It wasn't because of course the outcome is the outcome, but it was a game BYU wins by a decent margin. It was more about what it meant after 9 straight losses and on a week where they get in. It was just this culmination. Like, could this week go any better for BYU? So it was more about a kind of a big picture culmination event. You get the P5 stamp of approval on the same weekend. You end the streak to your rivals. You're not going to see them for a few years. This will be the last memory for a long time, and you did it the right way, and you finally broke the... It was just a special moment, weekend that kind of culminated a lot of things instead of just one, maybe, say, play or end of a game. Because the game, there was no drama in it at the end, but yet you could still count it down and enjoy it and savor it.
When Hall turned the corner and ran 50 yards for a touchdown, was called back because his toe stepped on the thing, which probably robbed you of a great moment because in the stadium, everyone thought he was inbounds. So he turns the corner and then just goes, and it's almost like justice finally being served.
Yeah. I thought at that moment, well, it's going to happen. It's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
Even though it came back.
That was I do remember that as one of the best weeks to ever be a Coug, right? That was amazing.
All right, let's take it up a notch here.
So how about Jimmer and number 9 BYU beats number 4 San Diego State in Provo in 2011?
Yeah, really both San Diego State wins were epic.
Were epic,
amazing. Really. Yeah. So I think the two games as a collection were just some of the most intense and just energized moments with two really good basketball teams featuring professionals on both sides. And it was just the height of competition. Amazing intensity. Going into San Diego State and even just the night before the game with Vern Lundquist being there and Steve Kerr being there and the big CBS crew ready to call the game the next day and knowing just how big this had gotten. Couldn't wait for the day to arrive, and then the day arrives, and man, to win in that environment at Viejas, the way they did it, I think Charles Abuo might have banked in a corner 3 that hit the side of the backboard, and early. That's okay if that's going to happen. BYU could be okay here today.
It might be all right. Yeah, that was fun.
How about BYU beats number 1 Gonzaga in Spokane in 2017?
Yeah, the back-to-back Gonzaga wins are all pretty cool. I mean, because nobody wins up there.
But these guys were number 1, and remember, they already had the headline printed of being 30
of
and
their little paper.
So when Nate Austin goes up, blocks that shot,
and chased it down.
Chased it down. The most improbable of all improbables, and you're describing it.
Yeah, I don't remember what I said or how I said it, but it was that sense that no one does this, and BYU's going to do this. And then to have done it, 3 straight years was pretty cool too.
And knowing what that meant for Dave Rose, did that make it more meaningful?
I was hoping, my hope was always that when you would beat Gonzaga there, it would be to win a championship, win a WCC championship. And it never broke that way. You were good enough to beat Gonzaga on their floor. I was hoping one of those years it would have been something that locked it down, but it didn't turn out that way for BYU. Yeah.
I kept waiting for the year where they'd win that the tournament championship down there. Just never
has.
Now, Gonzaga will rebuild now that BYU's getting out of the league.
Right.
Well, every year we think it's going to be a dip year. We see what their dip year looks like.
Yeah, exactly. This was the least talented team that Marks had, and they were.
Yeah. And Gonzaga, it's just. Man, it's amazing what they did when BYU joined the league. Because when BYU joined, it felt like BYU and Gonzaga were kind of similar. Like BYU just beaten Gonzaga in the NCAA tournament. Right. There was no sense that this was going to be something where someone pulls away from the other. So kudos to what Gonzaga did in those 12 years.
Mark's done a phenomenal job during that run. So we had the number 1 one. We also had the BYU beating Gonzaga number 2 in Provo.
Now that was an electric night
in 2020. The Marriott Center that night was like ridiculous.
Yeah, but it's so bittersweet, right? I mean, because you look back at it and you realize that was like the last happy moment we'd have that year. They were 1 and done in the conference tournament, and then everything shut down. Yeah. So it is so bittersweet. Because at how good TJ and Jake and Yoli were together, and to never have tasted the NCAA tournament with that group, that's just it's the ultimate.
But on that night,
I submit that there are 2 teams that in the last 10 years. The biggest, I don't know what you want to call it, gyp job, BYU and Dayton that year. I think Dayton could have won a national championship that year. And BYU was, I thought, a Sweet 16 team at least.
Yeah, I just felt they were going to be at least that year. The shooting was so good. They were the number 1 3-point team in the country that year.
And veteran leadership and all of the pieces, right?
It was all set up.
In that game, toward the end, Yoli gets a two-handed dunk that sealed it.
Exactly.
And place is going bananas. You're down there in the front row. You see the play develop, and then here it goes, and you can feel the satisfaction.
Mark Durant already knows this because he's been on the receiving end of it for years. But on really big plays and really big moments, he is my release. I will hug him. I will hit him. I will. I mean, he said it's a good thing he's a big guy, but he said he doesn't even feel it anymore. But I pound his shoulder non-stop throughout the course of a season. He's the guy. I let out my energy on him physically.
It's good that he's big. He can withstand that.
And again, like you said, I barely even feel you. You're so small, Greg. But he's the guy that is on the receiving end of all of that energy, and happily he just takes it and doesn't prevent me from expressing myself that way. But he gets a lot of physical abuse from me, and I know he did on that moment from Yoli for sure.
He did mention, like, we had Mark here. We had Devin and Mark on the show. Mark never, ever talked about abuse at all.
No.
Like, he just talked about how much he loves working.
I think he's gotten help, and he's worked his work through it. Doesn't even bother him.
He's all good. So,
how about women's soccer making their run to the College Cup in 2021?
Yeah, how about that? Yeah, that's up there too.
Yeah. Okay. So he's not going to give it. So that might. I think that might be the top.
Gave some away.
Felt like something.
All right. So are you ready? Have we missed any?
Of all the coaches we've had come in, and we've had almost all of them, all the head coaches, to get ready for the Big 12. When we had Jen in here, Jen Rockwood, the soccer coach, and we asked her, we said, okay, is this program the most prepared of all the programs to go into the Big 12? And she goes, oh yeah, we're going to compete for a championship the very first year we're in it. We're not afraid of that league at all.
Yeah, no, I won't be surprised.
I loved her confidence.
No, it will not be a shock at all if women's soccer contends and wins this thing and immediately becomes the first Big 12 team to win a championship. They're ready. They're bringing back everybody.
Yeah, I loved her confidence, but it's not unfound. Like,
no, this is a national powerhouse program.
Yeah,
right. And the Big 12 has a couple teams that they'll be right there too, but BYU's right in the mix. Like there's no sense of having to acclimate. And again, BYU I think should contend right away.
Yeah, that's
Greg Rubell, the radio voice of BYU football, basketball, baseball, and soccer, on the Wise Guys Tonight live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and wiseguys.com. And he's ready to announce his top three calls, moments of his BYU career.
Do three and then two. And then
well, here's the thing. First of all, I don't think it's right that I have to just pick three. It's way too hard. What if do
you want to give us a couple honorable mentions?
I do want to have, my three honorable mentions and then my top three. Is that
okay? Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
And when I say my honorable mentions, they could all be tied for third. They should be tied for third. I don't want to shortchange anybody.
Okay, so here's what we'll do: the three honorable mentions, and then we will go 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
With one being the ultimate
we didn't even
moment.
mention, and I don't know, maybe
feels like we already announced them.
One of my favorite games I've ever called.
Okay, I'll say this: of the six, if I were going to name six, let's say we already hit 5. Okay, so there's only one you're missing.
Okay. Well, I wonder if this is the one. I don't know, though. One of my favorite games I've ever called, and we called a lot of the same games, right?
Right.
Was when I called the BYU-Utah game where Jimmer made the half-court shot.
Right. People thought about that, too. We were discussing, in fact, baseball and us we were talking about this thing last night.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things that was brought up.
See, we were giving you some stuff to think about on the road.
I always give her Jimmer credit because my call on that, I made a comment when he made that shot. And Sports Center that night, sometimes they'll talk over the video. Other times they'll just let the call be the call.
They'll lay out.
Well, they just let our NBC call be the call. Mm-hmm. And so I just said, look at him. He's completely unfazed. I mean, he's just like, I'm Jimmer Fredette. That's what I do. I make shots.
That's right. I remember that.
And that was the number one Sports Center play. All my friends from New York called, dude, you were the number one player. So that one's special to me. But that game was also pretty special because he was ridiculous that night.
And I remember they took him out shy of a chance to get 50.
Oh, yeah.
Dave took him out. And it was a half-court shot. I went nuts. Mark went nuts. It was crazy.
You know what? And we probably should have, just out of the Jimmer night to beat Ainge's record in Vegas, probably should be in the mix, too. But I don't want to give anything about when he had 52. I don't want to give that away.
Game. Yeah, that was crazy.
All right, let's go. The honorable mentions. The Rubell's honorable mentions. You got 3.
I've only ever called one national championship game. And so BYU defeating Santa Clara in penalty kicks to get to the national championship in 2021 has to be right there. I mean, the drama of playing the 90 minutes, going to PKs, beating Santa Clara on their own field to get to the national championship.
I love that.
We were watching it.
Huge. Yep. And again, I consider it tied for third. Okay, that's how I kind of look at this thing.
Yeah.
All right. Then we will go with the win over Utah in 2021 to end the streak on the week that BYU gets into the Big 12.
All right.
Okay. I like that.
Yep. And then I want to go with Jimmer Fredette's night at Utah. You mentioned the half-court shot.
Yeah.
Okay. And now we go 3-2-1.
Now we go number 3 of
See,
the
I knew that was
1500.
in there because I love calling that game too. That was a great game.
Number 3, Jimmers 52 in Las Vegas against San Diego, against New Mexico.
New Mexico.
Here's the
semis.
Thing. They had lost 3 games to that point. UCLA in non-conference, right? And then New Mexico beat them twice.
Right.
So
one Jimmer had the flu, I believe, at home. I don't know if he played in the one at home.
And then the one right after Brand. They had Jimmer both games. Down at the pit, it was a great game from Snell. Tony Snell went off. And then, of course, right after Brandon Davies, they had to play New Mexico at home, and they weren't right mentally and lost that game.
Right.
Okay. So anyway, they were 0-2 against New Mexico, and this was to get to the title game against San Diego State in Las Vegas, and it was 2 records broken on the same night, where he breaks Danny's career record and he breaks the single-game record. And I just remember my energy as he approached 50.
And you were in Vegas. And it was Vegas.
And he's doing it with no free throws.
No free throw. He had one free throw attempt.
Right.
The whole game.
Even though he got fouled all night long.
Yeah. So Jimmer's 52, beating a team that had beaten them twice to get to the title game and breaking 2 records on the same night with Danny in the crowd, I thought was right there.
It was pretty awesome.
Okay.
That was an awesome night.
That is a worthy number 3.
Yeah. Number 2, and now these next 2, the top 2, how often do you get to call a play where your team goes from losing to winning with zeros on the clock? Zeros on the clock. Yeah. Okay, so these are game-winning plays, zeros on the clock, and number 2 is the Mangum and Matthews Hail Mary at Nebraska. Again, I've called 1 Hail Mary in my career. That's the one.
That's awesome.
Okay. We don't consider the John Beck to Harleen call a Hail Mary because they were so close to the goal line. This is a true Hail Mary, right?
Yeah, right.
So,
And was the Boise State one? That was too early.
No, because
they still scored another touchdown.
Kai still had to make a pick to seal the deal.
That's right.
Yeah, it was a great. It was kind of a last gasp.
It was a fourth down. The game riding.
Right. If they don't make the play, the game's probably.
Jurgens.
Yeah, but Mitchell, my guy, makes a great play. But we still had kind of Kua picking 6 right out the other. So that's number 2, right? Mangum Matthews.
Yeah, and the number 1 of all time.
Back to Harleen.
It has to be.
Yeah, I mean that was. I mean, it's Utah. It's at their place. It's zeros on the clock, and the play takes forever. Right? It just it's stretched out and out. So the drama
without a penalty,
drama built with every second. And after all that, how is somebody going to be open at all of that? After all of that, just the way the whole thing unfolded, and that was probably like the play where people said they made it their ringtone when they would come up to me and say, "Hey, I've got your calls." That was kind of a moment where I was like, "Oh, that was kind of a seminal moment." It was one that kind of resonated with Cougar Nation.
So here's where I was when I listened to your call. I'm on I-15. I had a Temple assignment in Vegas, and I was coming from that, and I was going to Channel 8 where I was anchoring the sports that day. And I'm listening to the game on the radio. I've kind of gotten over the fact that I had a Temple assignment during the game. Not sure how that all came to be, but I remember coming from there on I-15, ready to pull off on the Sahara exit to go downtown to where Channel 8 was, and that's where I heard it.
Yeah.
I was standing on the goal line right behind the goalpost with Brady Whittingham on my right with my headset on. I had to interview the winning coach because I was doing that game. And this is the thing I remember. I remember the last play, but I remember when Utah came down and scored to go ahead. Mm-hmm. Brady looked up at the scoreboard. Then he looked at me and he goes, "Crap." And I go, "What?" He goes, "We're going to lose. They left way too much time."
But
prophetic, right?
Yeah,
prophetic that Brady said that.
That is so much had to happen in that drive too. There were so many great plays made to set up that final play. But back to Harleen is kind of the one.
Oh, what a phenomenal! Yeah. The atmosphere down on the field was crazy.
People still ask me who was screaming in the booth because it's part of the call. And that was Ralph Sokolowski.
It was Ralph, that's right.
My statistician. And in fact,
had to explain that a few times.
I had to go back and listen to the 2001 Luke Staley touchdown we talked about earlier. I was listening to that last week for a different project, and he was there again. I could hear him again.
Yeah.
Ralph lets it out, man.
Let's talk about a couple of snubs.
What? A couple of snubs?
Couple of snubs. The the Hall to George overtime touchdown.
Yeah, I'm leaving out great games. I am.
Wow.
That was a
That's why you didn't want to do this.
That's
now
an
you want to do
overtime.
this.
But that's why we went down this
Now he's
road.
going to do this.
That's an
So
overtime winner against Utah.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
There's the Utah
I
win.
think
where-
it's important for people to realize
Max told
how
us
many
that-
big
Max
moments
told us
you've
that
been
was
in.
his-
Right, well,
that was his favorite play.
Yeah,
Max told us.
Well, then 4th and 18, right? As
4th and
part of
18.
the game where Harvey rumbles in and gets another win over you. I mean, wins over Utah are
Yeah,
epic,
they're
right?
always great.
Let's see. We had the win at Wisconsin.
Yeah, great field goal,
Field goal.
at the end.
Yeah. The field goal that they missed with their kicker, who was like, I don't know why we always play the best kickers in the country, but he shanked that one.
Yeah, did you call the UCLA blocked field goal?
Ethan Manuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
in
block by
Vegas.
Ethan.
Yeah.
Yep.
Then there,
That's
Again,
a
I told Dave this was not fair.
I know,
I
but
know
this-
it's not.
this one is.
Now we're doing this.
then
Now
there
we're
was
doing this.
the NCAA tournament down by what? However many points came back to
25
win it.
against Iona.
So there was that one.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Oh my! And the side story on that one. So there's a lot going on that night.
The beauty of this live stream is there's no end until we're done.
That was the night President Obama was in the building in Dayton, and so the security was unbelievable. So my normal pregame routine was all out of whack in terms of how long it took me to get into the building, get to my spot, because the president was in the building that night with, I think, David Cameron, the PM of Great Britain. So they were there for this basketball game, and it jacked everything up. So I was all out of whack in terms of timing, getting to my routine, and beyond that, I was getting sick. My voice was going, and I could tell. That's the worst feeling when you know you don't have your voice. And beyond that, Mark Durant couldn't do the game.
Who was doing it? Who filled
No
in?
one. I was solo.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So all these things coming together, and I'm getting sick, and they go down 25. I think, well, at least I'll have a nice, I won't have to get too excited because, it's going the way it's going. I won't, wreck my voice. But sure enough, they come back, and I wreck my voice because of how the game went. I had to scream and yell, and it was just going nuts. So I really destroyed my voice that night. And now we had to go down to Louisville and play in the their real opener 2 days later.
Right.
I had doctors on the phone. I was literally picking up pharmacies in Dayton after midnight to try and get my, and then luckily a couple days later I had enough to get through the Marquette game that we lost, but that was a wild night.
How about the TJ Haas buzzer beater at Houston?
Didn't call it.
You weren't on that one?
That was Shep and Mark Durant.
that's
Because
right,
football
because
was.
you had
I think I had soccer NCAA tournament that night.
Is that
maybe
what that
that's right.
was?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Shep had that with Mark, and Mark memorably was he gets hugged by players on the
Yeah,
sideline.
they came and hugged. Who hugs the radio guy? Everything's doing. And then Dave and Cheryl were right there watching. It was just a magical moment.
Yeah, that was Shep and Mark.
Andrew Waugh wants to know what's the best month of Cougar sports in your career?
November's always the wildest, most exciting month because football's still going, basketball's starting, and soccer's into its postseason usually right there. So that's when I'm hopping all over the place trying to squeeze everything in. So November is the wildest, busiest, craziest, best month, but nothing replaces March when you're in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah.
Or even if you have conference tournament, NCAA tournament, that's a really cool time of year.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Greg Romano asks us, hey, did Greg go through? So he's asking if he went through the broadcasting program at BYU.
I did.
He mentions
So
Tom,
did Dave.
Tom.
And we should note, Dave and I came through together, and in fact, actually walked on the same day.
We sat
were
next to each other on our graduation.
on the stage at the now being demolished HVAC. We were on the stage for our graduation ceremony together.
And Greg says the Tom Griffiths program because Tom
Yeah.
was running that program back when you guys were there. Tom was running the program.
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah, those were good times. We were sitting right in the middle, I think, and talked the whole time. And then we neither of us had to speak, so we just talked the whole time. I just gotten back from a trip. You've been busy, and then our careers did their thing, and then
Now they're back.
and then now they're back and been back like this for a long
so
time.
Dave and I came through the program together, graduated together. He went to Vegas. I stayed in this market, and then we've just kind of come back together.
Yeah,
And of course, he always had his toe in the BYU water in one way or another for most of that time. But
big toe. Sometimes
See,
a small toe.
Somebody
but
else
a
in here
toe.
also came through that program, but he's a little older than you guys.
Yeah, you're a lot older than us, but
and through their master's program.
it's amazing
with
that
Mel Rogers and all those guys.
hey, Mel's my man.
the journey that we've all been through, and going down this road and ask you to pick your top three, was
He's never asked me to do that, which is good.
it was good because I know your top three. At least we went to find out from Greg, but You've been involved in so many of these moments that are part of people's lives, and I'm sure folks listening and they'll listen to the podcast as we're talking about stuff. They'll go, "Oh, what about this game? Or what about that game?"
And they'll remember where they were on all the ones that you mentioned. Just like Dave remembered he was driving in his car coming from a temple assignment on that call. Like people will remember where they were when they heard that call.
No, so blessed to have been able to, be a part of those experiences for fans. And again, they all enjoy them in different ways. Some of them aren't listening to the radio. Some of them get to hear the highlight after. However it is, I just feel personally blessed to be able to be given the challenge to ideally describe them in the best and most professional and appropriate way possible, and capture everything that people want to capture.
Just so you know that for these next 5 questions, there are no honorable mentions.
No, you just have to come
It's
with
just
it.
as is.
I know.
So, and I should mention, I can't even tell you how many times, like during the heyday of the Mountain West, when I was covering the Mountain West for NBC and for the Mountain West Network and all that, many times BYU would have a basketball game or football game. I'd be over on the Front Range or in Wyoming or wherever calling a game. And if it was at a different time than the BYU game, perhaps I'm down at the Air Force Academy. I'm now driving back to Denver to my hotel, and KSL, that great signal, I'm listening to Greg as I'm driving back into Denver.
Yeah,
so
50,000 watts. It knows no bounds.
I'm
at
calling
night.
a game someplace else, but I'm still tuned in to Greg.
Yeah. And now
dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of times over the years.
That's cool to know.
So
And
really
whether
cool.
it's KSL or the Sirius XM, which is satellite, and now the app switch, basically wherever you are, you've got the radio.
Right. Yeah.
It's amazing. Paul James did what he did for so long with essentially the AM signal to do, to reach Cougar Nation. And thankfully, it's a great signal. A lot of people can listen to it a lot of places. Paul didn't have the technology at his disposal to have his descriptions as widely available as they are now. Yet, even with that limitation, if you want to put it that way, he is still the voice of the Cougars for a generation of fans. And I'd be remiss without, paying homage to Paul for being, my teacher, my mentor, my example, and the guy that gave me the belief that I could actually do this, because I didn't have it in myself until he said, go do it.
We're going to ask you about Paul in just a minute.
Yep. Okay.
5 questions for Greg Rubell.
And there's some are the same. So favorite sports movie. Please do not say that nonsense thing that
Skateboard.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, it's Gleaming the Cube.
God, stop it.
Can't be. I would take the Hanson brothers over that because they're hockey.
No, on Slap, what's that?
Slapshot? Is that what it is?
No,
it's
he
not.
did not
There are a
bring up
lot of great
Slapshot.
hockey movies out there. It's not Slapshot. I was in my hotel in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. We actually played baseball at Gonzaga on the weekend. We stayed in Coeur d'Alene. So in my hotel in Coeur d'Alene, doing some work and flipping through the channels, and it was on. And whenever it's on, I'm there. Wherever it is in the movie, I am there for the rest of the movie. Hoosiers.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say
That one will suck you in from
classic.
wherever.
1A, Field
I
of
was
Dreams.
gonna say-
Field of Dreams, 1A.
Field of Dreams was on just like 2 nights ago.
It's right. It's the same
I'm
thing.
flicking through
If you're ever there, you watch the rest of it.
Immediately in my head, I go, if you build it, they will come. And I couldn't stop. And Brenda's like, hun, it's 11 o'clock. I go, I don't
Rocky
care.
is pretty close.
And the Rockies, you can't just. I mean, there's some good Rockies.
We get a ton
down
of
the line.
our guests that are Rudy or Remember the Titans.
I'm not a Rudy or Remember the Titans guy.
Yeah,
I'm
we
just
get
not.
we get a lot of those. I would say those are the two most
I'm a
popular.
Rocky 3 guy though when it comes to the Rockies.
So
Really?
Did-
I
is
like 2. I just love the
Didn't
soundtrack.
Danny Ainge say Hoosiers?
He may have.
I think Danny
can't
may have
remember.
said Hoosiers. You're in good
Love
company.
Hoosiers.
Marie Osmond, I thought, said Hoosiers.
Oh yeah, Marie said Hoosiers. So there you go.
Okay.
So favorite singer or band?
I got a lot, but Rush for the Canadian heritage.
There's a
There
shock.
you go.
mean,
That's a
you know.
good one.
That doesn't surprise me.
Favorite
It's
breakfast.
been rushed since we were students. I knew that wasn't going to change.
Favorite breakfast cereal.
Crunch Berries.
Thank you.
Berries.
Like
Now, keep in mind, I live in a household where sweet cereals are verboten. We don't get sweet cereal. So basically, it's like if certain people are out of town, I'll go buy Crunch Berries.
do you ever
I know the-
like eat
I know what you're
all
saying.
of? Do you ever eat all of the old Captain Crunch part to save like 4 bites of nothing but the berries for the
No,
end?
I think the berries are too much. I like to have the actual Captain Crunch part of it. Yeah.
I do that sometimes, and sometimes on my Lucky Charms, I'll eat all of the oats and save just like 3 bites of nothing but Charms.
I was straight Captain Crunch for a long time.
That's him.
To me, the berries were a nice bonus. I didn't feel like it took too much away from the actual Captain Crunch foundation. So
Yeah,
okay
I
with
don't
it.
need the berries.
He
I
likes
just like it
regular.
straight.
He likes regular Captain Crunch. Isn't there a new one that just came out? A new Captain Crunch with something.
There's a lot of stuff out there.
There's
Scott
so
Warner,
many distractions.
somebody
I
just
stay
told me.
focused.
Yeah,
I just go right to
Okay,
it.
favorite hockey player of all time.
Come on, this is your wheelhouse.
No, because it requires a little bit of an. It's Wayne Gretzky. Okay.
Well, I don't know why you have to feel bad about that.
Because he is an Edmonton Oiler. And as a Calgary Flames fan, picking an Oiler doesn't make any sense whatsoever. How could you ever do it? But Gretzky's Gretzky. And when I was a kid growing up, and in my high school years, I would go to the paper every morning to see what he did the night before. And it was an amazing thing to see what he was doing.
He was the great one.
People weren't doing it, and then to get to watch him in person. I would get to go to Flames Oilers games in Calgary, watch him on the ice. I was like, blown away by it, and still.
I interviewed him a few times.
I got to interview him, and that's the thing.
Yeah.
So when I got to interview him, that was the one that really just kind of dude, you've got to know before going into this that I can't believe this is happening right now. What you mean to me and my hockey fandom, and the fact that you were an Oiler and I was a Flame. Yet I still love you more than anyone.
And he was first class in the interview. Getting a chance to interview him, you're just like, okay, this is why you're a star.
But he was so good at such a young age. So we used to go up and do a hockey exchange, basketball exchange up in Ontario. We'd go to Brantford and to Hamilton, play the Hamilton schools and the Brantford Collegiate Institute. Mm-hmm. We'd stay with their families, go play in their basketball tournament, and then they would come down and play in our hockey tournament. And we'd kill them in basketball. They would kill us in hockey. Mm-hmm. It's a little more balanced now, but... one of our superstar players was trying to pick up Wayne's girlfriend at the time.
Bad idea.
Yeah, it was not good. It didn't go over well.
He had enforcers,
Yeah. So Brantford Collegiate Institute, I think that's where he would have gone.
Yeah.
So, yep, a cool place. Loved the north neighbors of ours.
Favorite Calgary Flame, Lanny McDonald.
That was my next question. Yeah. Lanny.
Who's your favorite Calgary Flame?
Lanny was quick on the ice.
And he had the best mustache in the history of sports.
Who's your favorite Calgary Stampeder? Mine's Greg Peterson.
Tom Forzani and Greg Peterson together.
There you go, Greg Peterson.
Greg, by the way, named the Calgary Booster Club Sports Person of the Year last week.
I just saw that. That's really cool.
Well deserved.
So Greg, for people that don't know, Greg played corner back in the late 70s, early 80s at BYU. Went up and had a long career with Calgary, and the CFL was from up in Calgary.
His family was in our ward.
He's an attorney now. He's done a bunch of radio stuff and television stuff with Stampeders.
He's the color analyst on the Stampeders radio games.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. So good guy, and he's just reconnected recently back with the program, which I think is really cool.
He came back to the Utah State game last year.
Really cool. So, okay, last one. Favorite advice from Paul James.
Prepare, and we're talking legal pad. Prepare. Write your stuff out. That's what I learned from Paul. Paul's pre-games were scripted, okay? And I said, Paul, you could do that you could ad-lib. You could ad-lib. He goes, I know, but I want to say it the way I want to say it. And so I would be like, we'd have our meetings before the game Friday nights in his hotel room, and he'd be in his bed with his legal pad scripting out his pre-game show. And I learned from him the art of scripting, if you will. And so I've always done it. I did the legal pad thing before the laptops came around, and now I script all my stuff in the pregame. And ideally, if I deliver it right, it's not going to sound to the audience like I'm reading a script, but I'm scripting things out for me and my analyst, my color partner, to bring a really well-structured pregame to the audience. And so that was just one element. When he says prepare, like there's more to it. But his spotting boards, I remember going to his house and having him show me his spotting boards and how he put together his spotting boards. So learning from Paul how to prepare for a game was invaluable for me. And it's the middle one of my 3 Ps of passion, preparation, presentation. So you can't scrimp on the preparation part of it. It'll show up on game day.
That takes me to flashback. We had Sione Pua on a few weeks ago on the show. Came in amazing. He's amazing. And attention to detail, we can just tell. But we asked him what advice he would give. What's his overriding advice for players? And he goes, well, my whole theme with these guys right now is you can never outperform your preparation, period. So we will prepare. And I thought, wow, that's a pretty powerful statement. Pretty powerful. You cannot, no matter how talented you are, you cannot outperform your preparation.
I've often thought I may not be the world's best broadcaster, but I can be the best prepared. That part I can control. I can put as much into preparation as humanly possible so when I sit in on game day, there's a scripture that says, if you are prepared, you shall not fear.
Yes.
Right? And I don't want to fear. I don't want to have that feeling of being not ready in the broadcast booth. Yeah,
that's a lonely feeling. And you can tell when someone's unprepared, I think. When you watch, flip around, you watch enough games where you're like, that guy didn't go over any of those names, and some of those names are tough.
Yeah.
Sometimes you jack them up anyway, but I concur that preparation is the biggest thing because we'd prepare and maybe not use half our stuff, But I know
But then
that
we knew
if
it
we
was a good
didn't
game.
prepare,
Yeah,
it would
no,
be
I
a
knew it was
night
a
when
great
I need
game.
all the stuff.
If the
always
action,
have- always
if
have
the
more.
action
Yeah.
carries the game, and we've only used a quarter of what we prepared, we were well prepared, and the action carried the night, and then it was a great game. But we've all had games when we get in, we're like
4 hours long,
man,
boring games.
It's a good thing we did all this preparation because this was a horrific game.
Of course, in radio, we have less of an obligation to worry about that because no matter what happens, we're going to call the plays.
True,
but
yeah. True.
but I rarely use everything I've got. It's rare that I use everything I've got, but I'm glad I've got it. I'm just glad I have it. And then, by the way, it's been really fun. I'm new to baseball, relatively speaking. This is my 3rd season doing baseball games. I'm very new at it, learning how to do it. But that's been a great thing too, is learning how to squeeze things into a baseball broadcast, because it's a different feel and flow from the other sports I do. That's a really cool thing too, is this late in life, quote unquote, is having a new challenge and a new sport to call and find a new way to call a game. I really enjoyed it.
You're be on the call this Thursday, right? If there's no snow through Saturday.
Actually, it looks good. Actually,
Yeah, it's going to be a great
That's
weekend.
true.
It's going to be a lot of
Saturday's
flooding,
60,
but it's
right?
going to be a great weekend.
So everything might be covered with water, but Thursday through Saturday, BYU hosts San Francisco
Big
on
series.
BYU Radio.
Because those teams are both right now on the outside looking in on the top 6. Top 6
Right.
make the tournament in Vegas. By the way, cool venue in Vegas that they're going to for this final year in the WCC. Top 6 make it. They're right now on the outside looking in. So USF and BYU are tied for 7th right now, 3 and 6. There's a lot of time to go. They're going to play 27 games. They're 9 games in. But winner of this series puts themselves where they need to be. Losers got to worry a little bit.
They got to get healthy.
They've
Deming's got to be back.
They've been hit.
Sterner. And
really hard. Brock Watkins
at
and
short.
Ozzie Pratt and now Chad Call. And so there are a lot of guys down right now. They got to get them back. I think if things break right, they get healthy at the right time, they could win series down the stretch and get where they need to be in this thing, but they got to get healthy.
Gary Scheide and I are going to be calling the TV side of it, so between the two of us, we'll have it
covered.
wall to wall this weekend. The great Greg Rubell's with us. We're going to do some business here, so we're going to just have you hang tight. You've been with us this long. You got a few more minutes?
Yeah, you bet.
Now, you can just chime in when you want, but we want to kind of get everyone up to speed on what's going on.
A few campus notes. Volleyball, 16-6, 12-0 at the Smith Fieldhouse right now. The Cougars swept number 11 USC 3-1 and 3-0. What a great college volleyball environment the Smith Fieldhouse is. If you haven't had a chance to get out there, you need to get out there.
As exciting as it is in a full Marriott Center and a full Lavelle Edwards Stadium, there's something else about this volleyball.
It's something special. So, hey, this week, and this is why I say this, Stanford at BYU Friday and Saturday, 7 p.m. Mountain.
April 14th and 15th. Which you might not have, because I may have updated that before I sent that over to you. They're off this week.
Oh, yes, next week.
And then it's next week. On BYU TV. And Sean Olmstead's going to go for career win number 150.
So fun. Yeah.
He hadn't been doing it very long. He just wins. Wins over there.
He just wins. Okay.
Baseball 9-18, 5-3 at home, 3-6 in the WCC. Washington State beat the Cougars yesterday 6-1. Greg on the call there.
I'm telling you, man, I felt so bad for the guys just because we show up there and the snow's gotten cleared off, but it feels like, I think, 24 when they rolled in. Yeah. And granted, both teams got to play in it, but they've just played baseball. You want to feel good. You want to feel warm and loose, and they've had so few games where they can just go have that loose, warm, fired up feeling because they've been so cold. A lot of cold games like yesterday. Kudos to the fans that show up, by the way. BYU fans showing up everywhere, but you really have to tough it out these days with the way the weather's been going.
Softball can't get any games in either.
Everything keeps getting canceled.
Yeah.
So speaking of softball, 17-9. Is that right? Yeah. 17-9.
They start league now, right?
Yeah. They play 11 P5 opponents this season in softball. They're not afraid to play it. That's another program that's like, bring it on. Yeah. We're ready for the Big 12. Is it the Purple and Gold Challenge? 2-2 wins against Louisiana and North Carolina State, and 2 defeats to number 12 LSU. So there you go. That's how you're 2-2.
Another snow out today. They were supposed to be up in Idaho State.
At Idaho State. That's not happening in Pokey, right?
Right.
So Friday through Saturday, Santa Clara on the road in the conference opener. The next home game for softball, if they can get one,
this is a big one,
is Monday against Utah, 5 o'clock Mountain Time on the BYU TV app. That was a game that had been pushed back, and we're going to have a decent weekend. I think it's going to go into next week. I think we're going to be near 70 around here, which is something we haven't felt for since last October, maybe.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's April, you guys. It's supposed to be 60.
I don't know where all this snow is going to go once we hit 70 degrees.
So how about men's golf? At Stanford, the Cougars finished 13th, plus 18. Oklahoma won the tournament at minus 18. So Carson Lundell was BYU's top individual performer, tied with 8 golfers for 24th. Next up for men's golf Western Intercollegiate. That's next Monday through Wednesday at Santa Cruz.
The Masters starts on Thursday. Mike Weir, the 2003 champ, will be back there. He's at the Champions Dinner tonight, or it's probably over by now, wearing his green jacket. Tony Finau, who we've adopted as a BYU fan.
I walked the course with Tony last year a bunch because I was at the Masters, and with Tony's dad, who's just a splendidly wonderful person. Took us all around, all the places you're not supposed to go.
Was that your first Masters?
Yeah, it was my first one. Yeah.
Hideki Matsuyama didn't attend BYU, but Corey Yoshimura did.
That's right. I hope
He's
Corey's
PG
listening
executive in Japan, loyal listener to the show. And then Dan Forsman played the Masters 6 times. He's not in the field, but I wrote a story about his top 4 experiences at Augusta. That's at Deseret.com. That turned out pretty good.
Really cool.
He's a fascinating guy.
You sent that to me, and we love Dan Forsman. And he on the senior tour, he's been trying to get back in shape, coming back from some injuries. He looks like he's pretty fit and can get back.
He may get out there later in the
start
summer.
To compete later this summer. So we hope the best for Dan. Women's golf, 6th-place finish at Avenue Spring Break Challenge in Maui. Rough to have to go to Maui this time here when this is going on here. Alicia May Mateo, 6th-place finish. She's been playing really well.
She's having a great year.
BYU Intercollegiate at Riverside Country Club.
That's why we're having good weather Monday and Tuesday.
Right, because that's supposed to be this next week, right? So we'll see how that goes. The course was open, and of course it's closed now. So hopefully that sun comes out. Hey, there's supposed to be an Easter egg hunt there on Saturday for my grandkids. So let's just hope for good weather.
Let's hope.
So,
Carrie Roberts was going to be with us tonight, had a scheduling conflict. She's going to join us in 2 weeks ahead of the WCC Championship. Speaking of championships, UConn beat San Diego State last night 76-59 to win the men's title. The Aztecs could not buy a basket.
That's how they roll.
Yeah, they played D, but what was it? Didn't they go like 10, 12 minutes, maybe longer without a field goal?
Here's the thing against
and they were still in the game.
Against other teams in this tournament, they've been able to just shut people that they don't make shots for 8 minutes and the other team can't score. UConn's just too skilled offensively and pulled away. Like
Brian Dutcher said, we're a team that can win games without shooting it well, and that's a good thing to be able to lean on unless you're playing a team like UConn.
Well, and that's the niche that Steve built there with them, that Brian's taken. It's like we can compete, be a perennial top 20 team. We can't get the same kids that Kansas and Kentucky and Duke get. We can get guys that will just defend like nobody's business, and that'll make us competitive. Yeah. And this year, they had enough offense to get them to the championship game. Kudos to those guys.
And they had some magical moments.
And Greg knows those guys really well, too. That's a great staff. Those are good people. And so congratulations to Dutch and Matt and David.
Sam
and all
Scholl
those
got
guys.
more TV time as an assistant at San Diego State than he ever got at San Diego's head coach.
That's true. He's got them there, too. And so congratulations. You make it to that game. Wow.
Brian Dutcher was always my pregame interview when BYU would play San Diego State. I did Steve Fisher for maybe the first couple of years he was there. Then he delegated it over to Brian. So Dutch was always the guy I would talk to before every San Diego State game when he was the assistant there. So it was fun to see him get his team to where he is now with those guys.
Yeah. Women's hoops, LSU beat Iowa 102-85. How many wins do you think BYU's women's team will get next year with this recruiting class that they have coming in?
Oh, gosh.
Maybe that's not fair to say wins, but I mean, I think they would be able to.
I don't know what their non-conference schedule is going to look like.
The question is, can they compete?
I'm guessing
can they be
they're
in the
right in the middle of the Big 12
next year? I think they can be with this recruiting class. They're going to be young, and then they're going to get better than next year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they've amassed a great group to get to
best
moving
recruiting
forward.
class they've ever had.
How deep did the Big 12 women's tournament entry field go?
I don't know how far Texas went. I think Texas won the conference tournament. How many teams
went in from the Big 12? I guess what I'm at. Like how deep will they go? Like for example, men, are you looking to get 6, 7, 8 every year?
Yeah, it's not like that.
No, it's not. It's not quite the same.
But Shaley had a big tournament in the Big 12 tournament.
Texas won that tournament with Shaley.
And then they looked pretty good, and then they started to drop. But Iowa was dominant, and then LSU was big and physical.
With BYU going into the Big 12, it's going to be a shift in mindset, right? Because you may end up competing for fewer championships, but ideally playing in more NCAA tournaments just because of how deep that league will go compared to the WCC.
Hey, finish 6th in basketball, you're probably in.
Yeah.
Right. That's how it goes.
Next week, Matt and Savannah Shaw, father-daughter singing sensation with over 1.5 million followers on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram, going to join us. You can learn all about them at mattandsavannahmusic.com. April 18th, Brian Logan and Carrie Roberts will be here. Brandon Doman and Byron Rex will join us before the NFL draft. And Johnny Harleen will join us May 2nd. He's down there playing his band in Las Vegas, and he'll join us via Zoom on on May 2nd. We're working to get Gennaro Guilford since we've had all the other defensive coaches.
He'll be the last of the
on.
defensive
So we
group
got a
to
big
do
month coming up in April.
Johnny made my career. There you go.
The back to Harley.
Yeah.
And we'll remind him of that when he's on.
We'll tell him.
Lots going on this day, on April 4th, in our history.
Yeah, so 1818, Congress decides on the U.S. flag, 13 red and white stripes, 20 stars.
Yeah, that's what they were working
the
with
original, yep.
back then. 1850, today is the day Los Angeles was actually formed into a city.
Incorporated.
Yeah.
Wow. 1917, U.S. Senate agrees to participate in World War I, so the vote comes down.
1949, the NATO treaty was signed in Washington, D.C. There are a lot of things going on
And
this
did
day.
I just see that yesterday Finland joined NATO? So,
Did they?
Yeah, which was a little bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
So, 1968, Martin Luther King is assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee.
1975, Microsoft is founded. Bill Gates and Paul Allen. And now the computers are in every home, everywhere, and even on our phone. And
Paul Allen's very involved in sports.
Amazing.
So there you go. 1989, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar plays his last NBA game in Seattle. Kareem.
you know what?
And you know what? My boys and I always talk about what old-time players, and they consider Kareem an old-time player, what ones of those guys translate to today? And I think Kareem could still score.
Why
today.
doesn't anyone do a skyhook? Was it just...
Who could stop that today?
Yeah.
it's still
Nobody did
something-
it then.
Yeah.
He was
Yeah,
the only
it
one
seemed
that
like
did it.
some big guy would go,
I think
you know
he
what I'm
could-
going to
I think
do?
he could
I'm going to
score
do a
today, and
skyhook.
I think he could score and defend today. I think Kareem
If
translates.
Matt Harms had a skyhook when he was here...
We asked Danny if Larry Bird translates, and he was like, "Oh yes, he'd be one of the top 3 players in the league right now." So
Birthdays on April 4th, 1870, George Albert Smith, the 8th president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
and isn't that the George Albert Smith Fieldhouse that we're talking about? The volleyball game?
Athletic tie-in.
So there you go. 1997, Bill France, the pioneer of NASCAR.
NASCAR has been the rage. It seems like it's kind of slowed down after a peak,
Tell that to people in Daytona.
but it's still big.
Yeah.
Vegas gets 2 races, so I guess they're doing fine. And how about Craig T. Nelson, 1944, as Coach? Remember watching Coach?
Oh, yeah.
That was some classic writing and some fun characters.
But let's not forget his job in Blades of Glory.
Oh yes, that's
Come on now. I mean, yes, he's coach, but
I have to say that
I beg for your apology.
nobody has come up with Blades of Glory for their favorite sports movie yet.
No, they haven't. No, they have
there's
not.
probably a lot of good reasons for that. But still, that's one of those two where when you find, I'll watch a bit every time it's on.
Yes, I will
Oh
too.
no.
Our Wise Guys inspirational quote of the week is from President Gordon B. Hinckley as we head towards Easter
Right.
Sunday.
I thought this would be good in this week particularly. There would be no Christmas if there had not been Easter. The babe Jesus of Bethlehem would be but another baby without the redeeming Christ of Gethsemane and Calvary and the triumphant fact of the resurrection. Easter week.
So true. So true. We thank our guests, Hans Olson, Greg Rubell. Let's look forward to listening to them as they launch into the Big 12. How about that? If you get a break in a new guy, and there's only been, 3 new guys in most of our lifetime?
Yeah.
And you get to do it in the Big 12, which, we've been dreaming about for 12 years. The second we went independent, did we not dream about this day?
Yeah, I get to hit the ground running with a real pro. You guys, I mean, clearly he's going to be great at it, and I think listeners are really going to enjoy the product, and he's going to make a good broadcast even better. And to do it in a P12 forum, we couldn't be more excited.
Thanks for hanging out with us. You're welcome here
pleasure.
anytime.
Thank
Let's
you.
do it again for sure before September 2.
Okay.
Yep.
As
I'll
we
come back.
start
We'll do
beating the drum.
We'll do a
I
preseason
know
preview.
where it is now. No one else does, but I know
Yeah.
where it
You
is.
know where it
Don't
is.
tell. Don't tell. Security is very important to us.
Trust me.
So,
I'll come back.
It would. Thank you. It's great to have you here, and you're part of the history. You're part of the history we talk about every week.
yep.
It's
absolutely.
We're in it together.
It's just part of what you've got going on, and been involved in so many great things.
Thanks,
Next week, Matt and Savannah Shaw, they sing to millions. We hope they'll sing to us. We anticipate that they will.
Yes, they will.
And they're looking forward to coming on. The podcast will be up tomorrow. We'll send a copy to you. We'll send one to Hans. And that way we can verify what we heard tonight was Greg Rubell's top 3 calls of all time. Despite the fight to get there, we actually
we got
did.
him.
It was a
We got
process.
him.
Did
So,
roll it out. For Blaine Fowler, I'm Dave McCann. Thanks for watching The Wise Guys, and for Greg Rubell and Hans Olson. We'll see you next week, right? Let's have a good one.
See you next week.